Chapter 355. After flying along the tunnel for nearly 100 miles, Wuqi suddenly saw a broken, pale purple flying sword lying on the ground, sealed by Xian Bing. Obviously, the quality of this flying sword was excellent. Although the 9-inch-long flying sword had broken into 7 to 8 pieces, each of them was still emanating a faint immortal energy, and from time to time, wisps of cold air would burst out from them. Wuqi even felt that the flying sword was breathing on its own. It was inhaling and exhaling the surrounding ice elemental spiritual qi, gradually healing its wounds. If given enough time, it could even use the enormous energy to heal itself, fusing the broken sword back together. According to the scroll of stealing, a flying sword that could heal itself was no longer a realm that a lower-grade immortal item could achieve. It was an immortal item that belonged to at least an 18th-tier heaven immortal. Without batting an eyelid, Wuqi flew next to the immortal sword, opened up the Xian Bing, and picked up all 8 broken pieces of the immortal sword. The artifact spirit had already drifted away, and only the most basic divine sense brand was left behind. After a brief moment of pondering, Wuqi brought all the broken pieces to the earth element dragon scale shield in front of so many people. A clump of earthy yellow mist sprayed out from the shield, wrapping up all the broken pieces. Gradually, the broken pieces, which had lost the control of the item spirit, melted into tiny bits of purple liquid, fusing with the earth element dragon scale shield. The pale yellow shield was now covered with a layer of glistening, pale purple light, while countless needle-tip-sized purple dots could be seen blinking rapidly on its surface. A faint cold air was seeping out from the shield, while the ripple of divine will in the shield grew clearer and clearer. Hastily, Wuqi sent a thread of his divine will into the shield. With a slight tremble, the shield gradually turned into a clump of yellowish liquid with a hint of pale purple, just like the immortal armor Wuqi stripped off from Lin Qiulua's body. Slowly, it fused with Wuqi's skin, leaving behind a tiny dragon scale-shaped mark. Wuqi smiled. The quality of this broken immortal sword was indeed extraordinary. Although the earth element dragon scale shield had only fused with a small part of its energy essence, it was able to push the shield to the grade of an immortal item. He wondered what it would look like after the shield completely digested the sword. The earth element dragon scale shield had gained too many benefits during the trip to Shui Yuan planet. The characteristic of the innate earth element energy essence that could contain anything had given it endless potential for evolution. All the others had seen what Wuqi had done, but none of them said a word. Even Xiong Wanling and a few other old demon kings did not think there was anything good about this broken flying sword. In their minds, once a flying sword was broken, it would be completely destroyed, and would no longer have any value. By fusing it with his defensive magical treasure, Wuqi could at most add some raw materials to it. Apart from that, it served no other purpose. Sensing the faint ripple of divine will emanating from the earth element dragon scale shield, Wuqi laughed joyfully and said, "Come, let's keep moving forward. I'd like to see what's so mysterious about this place." Hee, it was the fragrant Ganoderma just now, and now it's a broken immortal item flying sword. What's next? Dead immortals? Wuqi's prediction came true. After traveling for less than 5 miles, a large, round hall with a diameter of over 10 miles appeared in front of them. Inside this hall, 3 corpses were seen lying on the ground, their bodies still emitting a faint gleam, their heads facing the tunnel where Wuqi and company came from. There were wounds on their backs. Obviously, they were killed from behind when they were about to rush into the tunnel. Carefully, the company walked to the side of the 3 corpses. Wuqi tore apart their torn robes, revealing the fatal wounds on their backs. The wounds were 3 inches wide, as thin as a piece of paper, and the flesh around the wounds had a blue hue, while the muscles had crystallized. Obviously, an immortal sword that contained an extremely cold and powerful force had ripped apart their bodies from behind, taking away all their life force in just a blink of an eye. Looking at the people surrounding him, Wuqi opened his mouth and spat out the sword of Greedy Wolf. Holding the hilt of the sword, he gently made a cut on the back of one of the corpses along the wound. The sword of Greedy Wolf produced a large amount of sparks, but it only left a white mark on the corpse's body. It did not even leave a cut on his skin. Wuqi nodded and said, "Corpses of immortals, they are indeed the corpses of immortals. TSK, they are the corpses of heaven immortals, and most likely, they are the corpses of some high-level heaven immortals. Therefore, unless it is a sharp weapon of immortal item grade, it is impossible to cut open their bodies. Zhao Kuo rolled his eyes and suddenly saw an exquisite blue ring worn on one of the corpse's fingers. However, before he could reach out his hand to grab it, Wu Qi had already snatched the ring away. Suddenly, a black dragon's soul flew out from the black dragon's spirit ring, opened its mouth and swallowed the ring. The black dragon's soul let out a satisfied burp, and the blue ring disappeared without a trace in his translucent body. Zhao Kuo was struck dumb. He stared at Wu Qi in astonishment and asked, "Why are all these things you have so strange and bizarre?" Wu Qi laughed dryly and did not say anything. He gave it a brief thought, and realized that all these treasures he had were indeed strange and bizarre. The earth element dragon's scale shield could devour immortal items to improve its power, the sword of greedy wolf could even devour cultivator's nascent divinity and nascent soul, the cold electric mirror could devour the essence of immortal items of the same element, and as for the 18 celestial fiend puppets, they basically did not reject anything. As long as they were materials that contained natural energy, they would be delighted. Shaking his head, Wu Qi removed the storage rings from the fingers of the other two corpses and fed them to the black dragon's spirit ring. After that, he waved his hand and said coolly, "In these 3 rings, there are 13 broken immortal items, 2 in perfect condition, and 32 bottles of immortal pills. But, all of them have turned into ashes. Apart from that, there are also some energy stones and immortal talismans. The immortal pills are useless now, and nobody cares about energy stones and immortal talismans. All the broken immortal items are mine. As for the immortal items in perfect condition, we can keep them and distribute them after we leave this place. What do you say?" Although the black dragon's spirit ring had devoured the 3 storage rings, all the miscellaneous items in them had been transferred to the black dragon's spirit ring. With just a quick scan with his divine will, Wu Qi knew what was in the 3 rings. Upon hearing what he said, no one dared to say anything, and just followed his suggestion. No one dared to go against Wu Qi's suggestion, as they either owed Wu Qi a huge favor, or their lives were in Wu Qi's hands. Therefore, whatever he said would be the law. After searching the 3 corpses and finding nothing valuable, Wu Qi casually waved his hand and shoved the 3 heaven immortal corpses into the spirit breeding ring. Although they had been dead for many years, and their immortal souls had long dissipated, their fleshly bodies were very strong. Using the divine flame of order, Wu Qi could still extract some blood crystals that contained powerful essence of blood and energy, immortal energy, and dharma energy. It was the same as recycling waste, and Wu Qi would never waste them. After cleaning up the 3 corpses, only then did Wu Qi and his company pay attention to the hall around them. It was a hall that was obviously made by man, fitting the saying that the sky was round and the earth was square. All 4 walls were made of ice element energy stones, and some strange patterns of flowers, birds, insects, and fishes were engraved on them. Originally, the hall was protected by a great number of immortal restrictive spells. But, judging from the dilapidated state of the hall, it was obvious that these restrictive spells had been destroyed by someone with brute force many years ago. Right in the center of the hall was a hole with a diameter of 1,000 feet, leading straight down. Water vapor was rising from the hole, and a very strong natural energy towered high up into the sky. Initially, 1,280 blue pearls, each the size of a fist, were embedded on the ground near the hole. But now, all the pearls were broken, and the one closest to the outer ring had even crumbled into fine powder. There should be some powerful defensive spells in this place as well, but apparently, all of them had been destroyed by someone with brute force. Wu Qi nodded and said, "Come, let's go down and have a look. Perhaps, we'll find some other surprises." Apparently, someone had cleared a path for us a long time ago. If we keep going like this, we'll be safe. Although he said that, Wu Qi still called out to Zhao Kuo, asking him to sprinkle out a handful of silver beans and summon a group of over 100 armored soldiers, who stood about 10 feet tall, to lead the way. The company followed behind these armored soldiers, carefully treading on clouds and flying down. The tunnel was about 1,000 miles deep, and the deeper they went, the colder the air became. Tianju and his sons were shivering, unable to withstand the cold air around them. It looked like they were about to be frozen into ice cubes. When Wu Qi saw that they could not defend against the cold breeze that was attacking them from all directions, he simply waved his hand, unleashing a beam of white light that pulled them into the spirit breeding ring, and threw them together with the three immortal corpses. After descending rapidly for over 1,000 miles, the bottom suddenly became clear, and a pool of clean water suddenly appeared before their eyes. Obviously, this was an underground world created by some immortal with a mighty divine ability. It measured 1,000 miles in circumference, and was about 100 miles high. Above their heads, the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars could be seen flashing on the rock walls. It was also the work of an immortal's magical power. The vast underground world was actually a pool of green water that was as calm as a mirror. When their divine will swept across the clear water, they found that it was about 10 miles deep. Countless huge, pale golden leaves that looked like lotus leaves were spread out on the surface of the water, connected by golden roots. Underneath those thick roots were countless tiny aerial roots that were as thin as human hair. These white and slender aerial roots were swaying in the water like countless strands of hair. Some of them were several miles long, and at their ends were countless fist-sized fruits that looked like pomegranates, sparkling and translucent like gems. In the center of this pool, right below Wu Qi and his companions, a thin leaf carved from green jade was spread out on the surface of the water, and an exquisite pale purple palace stood firmly between the leaf. The palace only had 3 entrances, with side palaces and gardens on the left and right sides. On the roof of the tallest palace in the center stood an exquisitely made bottle, about 30 feet tall, from which a strong water elemental energy was constantly bursting out. Just as Wu Qi and his companions descended from the passage, a great force suddenly came assaulting them out of nowhere. The force was so strong that it was shocking. Wu Qi and his company did not have the time to react, and neither did they have any power to resist. Their vision blurred, and their bodies were suddenly weighed down. When they regained their senses, they found themselves in a tall and spacious palatial hall made of light purple. On the jade platform in the center of the palace, a stunningly beautiful woman, clad in a pale purple robe, was lightly hovering above a pale purple lotus. Wu Qi and his companions only glanced at the woman. She gave a slight snort, and an enormous pressure came crashing down from above, forcing Wu Qi and his companions to kneel heavily on the ground. Amidst a muffled thud, the skin and flesh of Wu Qi and his companions' knees were broken, and large amounts of blood splashed out. Chapter 356. Wu Qi dropped to his knees. Although he had been cultivating the dragon transformation script and fused with a large amount of flood dragon blood essence, which made his fleshly body much stronger than ordinary cultivators, both of his knees were still broken. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Wu Qi gave a muffled snort due to the pain. While he was trying to stand up with both hands, a tremendous pressure came smashing down from above. Looking at the cold electric mirror losing its usual invincible power, Wu Qi was struck dumb. He stared blankly at the lady, then turned to look at Yan Qijuan and the others, who were lying on the ground and could not move at all. He could only smile bitterly and say, "Senior, you do have an immeasurable divine ability and magical power. But why do you have to make things difficult for us juniors?" Even though Scroll of Stealing was a miraculous technique, it was useless in the face of an absolute overall strength. Wu Qi, Yan Qijuan, and the others were struck dumb. Zhao Kuo interrupted with a stutter, but, compared to having one's soul destroyed, even. Wu Qi snorted coldly. He knew that what happened today was no longer under his control. Abruptly, the purple erect eye on his forehead opened. A purple cloud was seen wheeling inside the erect eye transformed from the cold electric mirror. Soundlessly, it shot out a purple electric beam that was as tiny as a strand of hair. A loud boom rang out as the electric beam exploded on the crystal wall, pushing it back a distance of about 1 strand of hair. With a wave of his hand, an extremely thin and hazy crystal wall appeared before the lady, accompanied by a pleasing sound of ice cracking. The golden beam hit the crystal wall, but it could only produce some golden light and water vapor, before it was bounced back by a tremendous counterforce. The golden beam whined and returned to Wu Qi's hand. When he looked at the crystal wall again, he found that there was not even a scratch on it, as if it had never suffered any attack. Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "Well, since you don't want to seek help from your sect, how are you going to avenge yourself?" Smiling bitterly, Wu Qi, who had both his arms and legs severely injured, obediently lay on the ground. He smiled bitterly at the lady and said, "Senior, if you have any orders, just tell me." With a twist of his body, Wu Qi's dislocated elbow and shoulder automatically reconnected. His body shook, and just as he was about to jump up, a cold light flashed in the woman's eyes, and an unstoppable force came crashing down on his head. Like a fly swatter swatting a fly, Wu Qi let out a muffled groan as he was beaten flat on the ground by that invisible force. Blood spurted out from all over his body, creating a huge spray of blood on the ground. Crack! Both of Wu Qi's elbows and shoulders were dislocated at the same time. His forehead thudded heavily against the ground and caused a thunderous bang. Wu Qi was in so much pain that his vision turned black. His head was so dizzy that he didn't know whether he was dead or alive. Lady Dark Goldwater breathed out a faint sigh. A cold gleam flickered in her eyes as she sneered and said, "Too bad, as long as my enemy is still alive, how can I bear to die without avenging myself?" She looked at Wu Qi with great interest, nodded her head, smiled and said, "Good lad, you're just a nascent soul cultivator, but how can you have so many good things? Could it be that the outside world has changed, and the world is now filled with all kinds of natural treasures?" Not allowing Wu Qi to refute, she pulled Wu Qi up from the ground with a great force and brought him straight onto the jade platform. Suddenly, Wu Qi recalled the last part of the scroll of stealing. It was the strictest warning given by the shadowy figure to Wu Qi, who had inherited the scroll of stealing. In the entire universe, there are countless almighty experts, and no one knows how many extraordinary people there are in this universe. The scroll of stealing was a great magic, a great divine ability, but was it the number one divine ability under the heaven? The figure of the peerless beauty in the purple robe was hazy, like the reflection of the water, flickering from time to time, creating ripples. While Wu Qi was sizing her up, 7 clumps of dark smoke suddenly sprayed out from her chest. Together with ear-splitting whistling noises, the smoke transformed into countless tiny fiends, scratching and scratching at her body. The lady's body was trembling, as a large amount of purple mist sprayed out from the purple lotus underneath her and fused into her body. With great effort, her body, which had become thinner and thinner after being attacked by those tiny fiends, finally managed to maintain its integrity. 6th Tier Gold Immortal. The jade platform measured several tens of feet in circumference, and stood about 100 feet tall. It was covered with a thin layer of shell, and the inside seemed to be filled with emerald green jade paste and chalcedony. A lotus root was soaked in the jade platform, while a stem stretched out from it, holding up a purple lotus the size of a basin. A thin layer of purple mist sprayed out from the lotus, wrapping around the lady's body. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, Wu Qi raised his head in a daze, staring blankly at the lady standing on the jade platform several hundred feet away from him. The frightening cold air was something that Wu Qi had never encountered before. Even the divine flame of order seemed to be slightly inferior in front of the cold energy. 36 tiers of heaven immortal, 18 tiers of gold immortal. Even among gold immortals, a 6th tier gold immortal was considered as a superior existence. According to the introduction of the tiers of immortals found in White Cloud Immortal Sect's scripture pavilion, a 6th tier gold immortal was a formidable figure who could found his own sect, occupy several dozens of heavenly realms, and dominate an entire region. Motherfucker! Wu Qi cursed angrily. This lady was extremely rude and unreasonable. Even if Wu Qi and his companions had intruded into this place without permission, how could she humiliate them without saying a word? Flustered and exasperated, Wu Qi could not care less about that. With a shake of his left hand, the spirit-restricting rope shot out a long purple beam that stretched over 1,000 feet long, illuminating the entire hall and making everyone's hair turn purple. Clang! 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 Wu Qi knocked his head on the ground 9 times, nearly breaking his head. Wu Qi was taken aback. He pointed his finger out, and the sword of greedy wolf transformed into a dark beam and shot out. 14 wolf heads wheeled and danced in the air, letting out sharp and unpleasant howls. However, just like the spirit-restricting rope, before the sword of greedy wolf could touch the lady, she lightly pointed her finger at it, and the sword fell into her hand with a reluctant howl. With a wave of her hand, the clone Wu Qi left in the sword of greedy wolf was erased once again, and he coughed out another mouthful of blood. Gingerly, Wu Qi looked at Lady Dark Goldwater, laughed dryly and said, "May I ask, how did you end up in such a situation? Not only are you left with a broken soul, you are also possessed by a vicious restrictive spell, and suffer the pain of fiends refining your soul day and night. Even though you managed to survive with the purple field spirit nourishing mist, produced by the purple lotus, I'm afraid you won't be able to last much longer. Why don't you escape quickly and be reincarnated?" According to the records in White Cloud Immortal Sect, the immortal monarch who governed the entire minor heavenly circle realm where Wu Qi and his companions lived was just an ordinary 34th tier heaven immortal. Before a 6th tier gold immortal, a 34th tier heaven immortal was not even an ant, not even qualified to be called a speck of dust. The difference between a gold immortal and a heaven immortal was like the difference between a heaven immortal and a criminal. They were two completely different living beings. The lady's expression flickered, and she murmured under her breath, "Innate earth element energy? This fellow has such a strong cultivation base, he is really lucky." Laughing coldly, the lady shook her head and said disdainfully, "Do you think you can defeat me with just a lower-grade immortal item?" The lady narrowed her eyes and gave Wu Qi an appraising look. After a full 15 minutes, she said coolly, "I'm Lady Dark Goldwater, and my master is." She pondered for a brief moment, then shook her head, sighed and said, "Well, since I've fallen into this situation, it's not good for me to mention my master, lest I bring disgrace to your master's reputation. When I was at my peak, before my immortal body was destroyed, I was a 6th tier gold immortal. This heavenly water dark palace is a temporary palace I built when I was traveling around the world, bastard." Wu Qi was so angry that he rolled his eyes. Ignoring everything, he waved his hand and unleashed countless dragon-scaled golden beams from his left hand, piercing straight towards the lady's body amidst ear-splitting whistling noises. The lady smiled faintly and pointed her finger out, trying to subdue all the dragon-scaled golden beams. However, the tiny bit of innate earth element energy essence attached to the earth element dragon scale shield could not be controlled by her. The golden beams continued to fly forward with shrill whistling noises, and were about to hit her. 6th tier gold immortal. Wu Qi's eyes suddenly shone brightly. No wonder this lady possessed such a frightening overall strength, no wonder she had such an unimaginable ability, and no wonder she could easily toy with Wu Qi and the others in the palm of her hand. No wonder even Wu Qi thought she was just a broken soul, and even the core of her immortal soul had been shattered. She was just a broken soul, yet she still possessed such a frightening power. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, the fiends, which seemed to have grown a little stronger, transformed back into dark smoke and rushed back into the lady's body. The lady breathed out a heavy sigh. Her body tilted slightly, but very quickly, she stuck out her chest and hovered above the purple lotus flower. However, before the usually successful spirit-restricting rope could get close to her, she pointed her finger at it. Immediately, it transformed into a purple rope and fell into her hand, as if a young daughter-in-law had bumped into an evil mother-in-law. The lady gazed coldly at Wu Qi, then casually shook the spirit-restricting rope. Wu Qi felt a severe pain coming from his nascent divinity, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. The thread of his divinity he left in the spirit-restricting rope was turned into nothingness by an extremely frightening cold air. Lady Dark Goldwater remained silent for a moment, then said slowly, "Therefore, I want to take in a disciple, and let him avenge me. It is only right and proper for a disciple to avenge his master, and they won't laugh at me. Don't blame me for using a heavy method to capture all of you. If I don't subdue all of you, how would you know about my unfathomable immortal techniques and divine abilities?" Lady Dark Goldwater put away the crystal wall with a puzzled look, then looked coldly at Wu Qi, nodded and said, I didn't expect a little boy like you to have such knowledge. I am indeed just a broken soul now, and even the core of my immortal soul has been shattered. If I hadn't luckily found a purple soul heaven lotus seed when I was young, perhaps my soul would have long perished and vanished. From afar, Lady Dark Goldwater thrust her palm out, causing Zhao Kuo to howl miserably and fly several hundred feet up into the air. Grinning coldly, Lady Dark Goldwater said, Ignorant little boy, what do you know? Even if I have to perish and vanish my soul, I still have to protect my face. Right when Wu Qi and the others were smiling bitterly, a faint white gleam shone from Lady Dark Goldwater's eyes as she gave Wu Qi and the others a glance. Suddenly, she waved her hand at Wu Qi and said with a smile, Young lad, you possess a magical item formed from innate earth element energies. You have a pretty good fortune, and you have a promising future. Are you willing to acknowledge me as your master? Wu Qi and the others were struck dumb. So, this shameless Lady Dark Goldwater attacked them because of this? Why didn't you contact your master and ask for help? Asked Wu Qi in a deep voice. There was no reason for him to suffer like this. Lady Dark Goldwater rolled her eyes and cried out sternly, How could I let my master know about such an embarrassing thing? If they knew about this, how could I face anyone again? How could I survive? Wu Qi took a deep breath and briefly sensed the surrounding space. The space was very stable, and had been sealed by a great force. Even though Wu Qi had burned his own nascent divinity and risked his life to launch a desperate attack, his blood escape art could not break through the force that had sealed the space. The force was too strong, so strong that it surpassed the limit that Wu Qi could understand with his current cultivation base. Therefore, there was no way he could escape. Chapter 357. 9 loud kowtows nearly knocked Wu Qi unconscious. With great difficulty, he raised his head and stared at Lady Dark Goldwater, his eyes filled with anger and shame. Lady Dark Goldwater lowered her head and looked at Wu Qi, who was lying motionless on the ground. Then, she lightly waved her right hand at Yan Qijuan and the others, who were lying in the hall. Immediately, all of them rolled their eyes and fainted. A white water wave rolled out from where they stood, wrapping around the group and spinning them. Gradually, the water wave disappeared, and Yan Qijuan and the others were transported to somewhere unknown. Lady Dark Goldwater said coldly, These people are a hindrance. I'll let them have a good soak in the heavenly Yin True water down there. Heavenly Yin True water. Wu Qi shook his buzzing head and smiled wryly. This was a good thing, absolutely a good thing. For those body cultivators of Heaven Immortal Realm, the heavenly Yin True water was the best material to strengthen their fleshly bodies and temper their immortal bodies. But, this material was too good, so good that apart from Heaven Immortals, no one could enjoy it. Although Yan Qijuan and the others would definitely benefit from their fleshly bodies after being soaked in it, the pain they would suffer would be no different from being cut into pieces by 1,000 blades and having their hearts burned by a fiend flame. This lady was too cruel. Wisely, Wu Qi kept his mouth shut, not daring to say anything. Lady Dark Goldwater stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while, then said coldly, It has been so many years, and you are the first group of cultivators who intruded into my palace. Among all these people, you are the only one who dared to attack me. You are a brave one, and since you have an innate earth element treasure with you, you must be very lucky. With your mortal body, you actually managed to cultivate the dragon transformation scripture. You seem to have a wide network of people. Wu Qi touched the black dragon's spirit ring. A faint dragon roar rang out, as the black dragon's soul carefully poked its head out and nodded at Lady Dark Goldwater in a low voice. Lady Dark Goldwater gave the black dragon's spirit ring a surprised look, then sneered and said, A heavenly dragon is actually refined into a storage ring? If word of this reaches the ears of the few grand elders of the dragons, no wonder you can learn the orthodox dragon transformation script. After pondering for a brief moment, Lady Dark Goldwater looked at Wu Qi and said, You've acknowledged me as your master. Therefore, you have to avenge my enemy. Wu Qi looked at Lady Dark Goldwater pitifully. He really didn't want to have a master like her. But now, he was like a fish on the chopping block. No matter how much he disliked this master, he could only reluctantly lower his head and respectfully say, "Of course. It is only right and proper for a disciple to avenge his master." Lady Dark Goldwater nodded slowly and warned, "In the future, if you kill my enemy, don't let anyone know about this. Master's illustrious reputation cannot be destroyed in a day. I'd rather let all the powerful beings in the universe mistakenly believe that I died in an accident than let others know that I was schemed against and ended up in this state. Can you do it?" Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "Of course I can. Protecting Master's reputation is also a disciple's responsibility." Wu Qi would never tell the world that he was Lady Dark Goldwater's disciple, unless he was out of his mind. Lady Dark Goldwater was a mighty 6th-tier gold immortal, yet she had ended up in this state. It was not hard to imagine what level of existence her enemy was. Even if Wu Qi could avenge Lady Dark Goldwater in the future, he couldn't let anyone know that he was her disciple. Who didn't have a few friends? Who didn't have an old friend? Naturally, those who befriended a gold immortal were also gold immortals. Perhaps, someone would know about Lady Dark Goldwater. If Wu Qi announced that he was Lady Dark Goldwater's disciple after killing her enemy, wouldn't he be intentionally provoking those who knew about him to come and seek revenge? Lady Dark Goldwater nodded satisfactorily at Wu Qi's straightforward answer. With a frown on her face, she began to slowly tell him how she ended up in this state. According to Lady Dark Goldwater, her master was an amazing man, a man who truly possessed an almighty divine ability. And Lady Dark Goldwater was the disciple whom her master was most proud of. In just 10 periods, she had cultivated herself into a gold immortal from a mortal. Patriarch Jiang Yun had been cultivating painstakingly for 100,000 years, and was still trying to break through the bottleneck of 35th tier heaven immortal. On the other hand, Lady Dark Goldwater had only spent 10 periods and 1,200,000 years to break through the realm of gold immortal. She could be considered as one of the top geniuses in the entire universe. Lady Dark Goldwater met her master when she was 12 years old. After that, she cultivated painstakingly for 10 periods and became a gold immortal. After cultivating painstakingly for another half an eon, she became a 6th-tier gold immortal. The speed she achieved made many people jealous, but it also scared them to death. Lady Dark Goldwater kept talking about all the things related to her, while Wu Qi was analyzing her facial expressions and the tone of her voice, as well as the descriptions she gave. She was a genius who cultivated wholeheartedly, to the point that she nearly became stupid. She was a top genius in the path of cultivation, but when it came to the ways of the world, she was a complete idiot. According to her own words, in the long life that lasted for over half an eon, apart from her master, she had never spent more than half a year with other living beings. She was 12 years old when she joined the sect, and when she became a 6th-tier gold immortal, her mental age was only 14 or 15 years old, and definitely not older than 16 years old. She was a 6th-tier gold immortal with a mental age of 16 years old, and came from a very powerful sect. She was pampered and spoiled since she was young, and no one had ever disobeyed her will. Because of this, Lady Dark Goldwater had developed an eccentric, crafty, and unreasonable personality. Therefore, when Wu Qi approached Lady Dark Goldwater's temporary imperial residence and entered the sensing range of her broken soul, Lady Dark Goldwater, who had been holding herself back in the palace for a long time and was about to go crazy, immediately teleported them into the palace, and began to torture them with violence. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Master, how did you get trapped in here?" Lady Dark Goldwater went blank for a moment, then frowned. After stepping into the realm of 6th-tier gold immortal, no matter how hard Lady Dark Goldwater worked, she could not make any progress in her cultivation. The worldly affairs and the ways of the world were also one of the heavenly Daos. It was true that by cultivating behind closed doors, Lady Dark Goldwater could become a 6th-tier gold immortal, but it would not allow her to make any progress in her cultivation. Therefore, under the instruction of her master, Lady Dark Goldwater left her home, traveled the world, and made a name for herself. Wu Qi gave her a few suggestions, and following Wu Qi's suggestion, Lady Dark Goldwater told him about the few things she was proud of in the past, which made her famous in the entire universe. They were none other than the deeds of upholding justice for the weak and upholding justice for others. And the only way Lady Dark Goldwater dealt with these things was to kill the entire clan of those who she thought were wrong and deserved to die, leaving no survivors. During the 3,000 years that Lady Dark Goldwater traveled the world, she had done more than 1,000 evil deeds. Because of the entanglement of grudges and the desire for revenge, a few gold immortals came to Lady Dark Goldwater for the sake of their disciples and clansmen. In the end, they were all killed by Lady Dark Goldwater. After that, she even went to their master's sect and killed every single one of them, regardless of whether they were good or bad, regardless of whether they were good or bad. Wu Qi swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater, who had her eyebrows dancing up and down as she talked. He had no words to say anymore. Perhaps it was because of several tens of thousands of years of loneliness that Lady Dark Goldwater had developed the habit of being a chatterbox. Her rambling went on for a full 24 hours. After that, Wu Qi saw 7 wisps of dark smoke rush out from Lady Dark Goldwater's chest, transforming into countless tiny fiends, pulling and biting at her broken soul. Lady Dark Goldwater trembled from head to toe in pain, and her broken soul was flickering. Just like yesterday, by relying on the purple field spirit nourishing mist to replenish the consumption of her broken soul, Lady Dark Goldwater barely managed to fend off the invasion of those fiends. However, it seemed like her broken soul had grown weaker again, and was showing signs that it could not hold on any longer. Lady Dark Goldwater laughed dryly, stared at Wu Qi and said, "Look, this broken soul of mine is getting weaker and weaker over the years. I can't hold on any longer." After a brief moment of pondering, Lady Dark Goldwater shook her head and said, "Now, listen carefully. The one who schemed against me is the grandson of the sect leader of Green City Sect, Reverend Li Yang. The one who schemed against me together with him is Fairy Xian Dai, whom I considered a good friend. Throughout all these years, I only have one good friend, and that is Fairy Xian Dai. I never expected that she would put Xiang Lu's saliva in my tea, and then attack me together." Wu Qi stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater. Fairy Xian Dai. He was not interested. Reverend Li Yang. He was not interested either. But Green City Sect. If I may ask, what is the background of this Green City Sect, Master? Wu Qi asked in a deep voice. Lady Dark Goldwater frowned. Tilting her head to one side, she pondered for a while, then shook her head and said, "Over the years, I've been harassed by those fiends, and some of my memories have become blurry. The Qingqing sect should be a sect formed by the immortals who ascended from the Qingqing mountain on that planet, which was left behind by an ancient immortal in the human world." After a brief moment of silence, a bright gleam flashed across Lady Dark Goldwater's eyes. Currently, Green City Mountain is one of the strongest sects in Xianyang Heaven Realm. Their sect leader is a 3rd-tier gold immortal. Reverend Li Yang is his grandson, and his cultivation base is the same as Fairy Xian Dai's, a 7th-tier gold immortal. A sect formed by immortals who ascended from Green City Mountain. A sect formed by immortals who ascended from Green City Mountain. Suddenly, the bloody faces of Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and many brothers of Greedy Wolf Group appeared before Wu Qi's eyes. He nodded lightly and said, "Is that Green City sect from Green City Mountain?" Reverend Li Yang. "Fine, I'll kill him, and then I'll completely destroy Green City sect." Clenching his fists tightly and producing cracking noises from his joints, Wu Qi said softly, "I'll completely destroy Green City. I can't find my way back now, so before I go and wipe out their descendants, I'll kill all their ancestral masters in Xianyang Heaven Realm." Lady Dark Goldwater clapped her hands lightly and said with a smile, "Good. You must have this confidence. If you can wipe out Green City Mountain, I'll allow you to find your ancestral master and tell her what happened to me. If I don't wipe out Green City Mountain, I can't bring myself to let anyone know that I've fallen to such a state." Lady Dark Goldwater sighed lightly, shook her head, and said, I had such a mighty reputation in the past, but now, I've fallen to such a state. I can't afford to lose this face. She breathed out a long sigh, then turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Are you ready? I'm going to officially take you as my disciple. I'll leave the great responsibility of avenging me to you." Wu Qi stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater and asked, "Ready for what?" Lady Dark Goldwater gave the surroundings a lingering glance. Suddenly, her body trembled, and all the jade essence paste on the jade dais transformed into a clump of purple mist, wrapping around the purple soul heaven lotus and Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul. Then, it transformed into a beam of watery light and shot into Wu Qi's forehead. Wu Qi's nascent divinity trembled, and his vision turned dark as he fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 358. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, a vast ocean, a clump of earthy energy, a green forest, a sea of fire, and a mountain of blades were hovering in the boundless spiritual ocean. These were the manifestations of the innate 5 elements energy in his spiritual ocean, directly resonating with the 10 innate Jin Dan cores in the meridians of his arms. The phoenix fire pouch hovered above the vast ocean, earthy energy, green forest, sea of fire, and mountain of blades. From time to time, innate energies of 5 colors would fly up and fuse into the phoenix fire pouch, allowing the divine flame of order to refine them, making the flame grow stronger and stronger. 2 divine lights of purple and green illuminated the entire spiritual ocean, causing purple mist to rise and green light to flicker in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, making it look like a cave abode of an immortal, filled with endless mysteries. His nascent divinity, which he had formed in advance with the help of the heavenly thunder, was sitting neatly underneath the phoenix fire pouch. From time to time, he would spit out wisps of golden light and fuse them into the purple clear divine flame, improving the communication between him and the flame. The innate energies of 5 elements in the surroundings kept fusing into his nascent divinity, making it more condensed, purer, and filled with more miraculous transformations. A wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul rushed into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean along with a large amount of jade essence paste from the jade dais, then abruptly transformed into a clump of dazzling purple golden light that spread in all directions. The purple golden light transformed into countless restrictive runes and imprinted themselves into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, fusing with the purple mist and golden light that rose from his spiritual ocean. Some of them even fused with his soul and transformed nascent divinity. As the last wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit was about to attach itself onto Wu Qi's soul, the divine flame of order swayed and suddenly transformed into a towering flame, burning towards the last wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit. Lady Dark Goldwater, who was left with only a wisp of her broken soul, had struggled for countless years, and had just dispersed all the power in her broken soul, was struck dumb. Suddenly, she screamed, "Divine flame of order! How could such a damn thing exist?" Her shrill cries echoed slowly in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. The unconscious Wu Qi failed to control the divine flame of order, and the flame that had gone out of control burned the last thread of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit into nothingness. A great amount of memories and experiences rushed into Wu Qi's nascent divinity from her disintegrated true spirit like rivers returning to the sea. Lady Dark Goldwater's life experiences, all her understanding of the Tao, all the divine abilities and mystic techniques she had cultivated, of all of her memories were inherited by Wu Qi. Meanwhile, the last wisp of her true spirit, the last hope of reincarnation, was completely wiped out by the divine flame of order. Of Qi the divine divinity. Finally, of Wu Qi of the divine divinity, and of Qi, and of consciousness, and of the knowledge of Qi. The amount of knowledge contained in Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul was too vast and profound. The process lasted for a full 7 days and 7 nights, and finally, all the knowledge gradually belonged to Wu Qi. Finally, Wu Qi, who was knocked unconscious by the enormous amount of knowledge, slowly opened his eyes. Sitting cross-legged on the shattered jade platform, Wu Qi frowned as he tried to recall what had happened. From the memory of Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul, he found out what she had done to him, and could not help but curse under his breath. As a 6th-tier gold immortal, even if her mental age was a little childish, she was definitely not someone who could be easily provoked. What Lady Dark Goldwater had done had proved this point. She was beaten to the point where she was left with only a wisp of her broken soul, and suffered from the wanton harassment of those fiends day and night. Lady Dark Goldwater was too embarrassed to ask for help from her master. Another reason was that she had to use all her energy to resist the attacks from the fiends, and thus, she did not have the energy to ask for help from her master. Just now, with the enormous energy transformed from the jade essence paste that had been stored in the jade platform for several tens of thousands of years, she used it to protect her broken soul and shattered the purple soul heaven lotus that had protected her broken soul for several tens of thousands of years. Then, with the magical power of the lotus, she extracted a wisp of her true spirit, combined all the energy of her immortal soul, the curse of the fiends, and the energy transformed from the jade essence paste into one, forming an immortal restrictive spell called Dark Een Soul Captivation, which imprisoned Wuqi's nascent divinity and soul. Although the combined power of the three was far weaker than the peak strength Lady Dark Goldwater possessed, it was still powerful enough to fight against a full-force strike of an 18th tier gold immortal. The Dark Een Soul Captivation spell formed from such a powerful force had imprisoned Wuqi's soul and nascent divinity, leaving Wuqi with no ability to resist. This restrictive spell would decide Wuqi's life and death. With a single thought from Lady Dark Goldwater, who controlled the restrictive spell, Wuqi's soul would vanish into thin air. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's plan, she used the restrictive spell to imprison Wuqi's soul, then fused the last wisp of her true spirit into Wuqi's soul, using Wuqi's soul to nourish her own true spirit. At the same time, she could give Wuqi advice and teach him the great Tao of Gold Immortal. This was equivalent to having a 6th tier gold immortal following Wuqi at all times, teaching Wuqi everything Lady Dark Goldwater had learned in her entire life. At the same time, Lady Dark Goldwater had also controlled Wuqi with the restrictive spell. With that, Wuqi could only listen to her orders, becoming a tool for her to exact revenge. When Wuqi's cultivation base was strong enough and he ascended to the immortal realm, his soul would transform into an immortal soul, and Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit would be able to be gradually reborn and grow stronger with the help of his immortal soul. Perhaps, she would not need to reincarnate in the end. As long as she extracted enough soul source energy from Wuqi's immortal soul, she would be able to regather her immortal soul and reconstruct her immortal body. It would save her a lot of hard work. Once Lady Dark Goldwater achieved her goal and successfully reconstructed her immortal soul without reincarnating, it would be hard to tell what would happen to Wuqi at that point of time. However, right after Lady Dark Goldwater entered Wuqi's spiritual ocean, she excitedly dispersed all the energy in her broken soul, transforming it into the Dark Een Soul Captivation to control Wuqi. As a result, her true spirit had lost all the energy protecting it. Before it could merge with Wuqi's soul, it was turned into nothingness by the divine flame of order, which had its own spirituality. All her knowledge and experience had become Wuqi's hands. However, the Dark Een Soul Captivation had been successfully activated, smoothly controlling Wuqi's soul and nascent divinity. On top of that, after losing the suppression from Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit, the restrictive spell was like a ticking time bomb, and it began to count down automatically. According to Wuqi's estimation, it would take about 1,000 years for the Dark Een Soul Captivation to explode and completely destroy his soul. What a treacherous old woman. Do you really have to do this? Wuqi's body was trembling with anger. This was a restrictive spell cast by an 18th tier gold immortal. Even if Wuqi exerted all his strength, would he be able to break free from the Dark Een Soul Captivation in just 1,000 years? He could understand Lady Dark Goldwater's eagerness to seek revenge, and he could understand why she was so cautious and worried about him. But, did she really have to use such a vicious restrictive spell? She was worried about the disciple she had just taken in, so she used such a vicious restrictive spell to control her disciple. This Lady Dark Goldwater was indeed a person who would wipe out an entire clan at the slightest provocation. She was really merciless in her attacks. Smiling bitterly, Wuqi rose to his feet and said in a low voice, "I'll take it one step at a time. The Dark Een Soul Captivation is not necessarily impossible to get rid of." His nascent divinity trembled slightly. Wu Qi could clearly sense that a thread of purine energy, as soft and gentle as water, had quietly coiled around his nascent divinity and 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Every single particle of Wu Qi's soul and nascent divinity was infected by this purine energy, and had fused with it. It could not be separated or expelled. On top of that, this purine energy was absorbing the innate energy in Wu Qi's body and growing stronger. Without the suppression from Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit, this thread of purine energy was following the original function of the Dark Yin soul captivation to destroy the soul and nascent divinity, growing on its own like a cancer cell. In about 1,000 years, the Dark Yin energy would grow to its limit, and the Dark Yin soul captivation would explode. At that time, Wu Qi, who had fused with it, would have his soul destroyed by the explosion. Lady Dark Goldwater's reckless action had not only delayed her own life, it had also pushed Wu Qi to the edge of a cliff. I'll take it one step at a time. Dark Yin soul captivation. The most powerful soul-restricting technique found in the Dark Yin grand magic of Lady Divine Water of Dark Yin True Water Palace? Dark Yin True Water Palace? The supreme overlord of transformative Yin heavenly realm? Lady Divine Water. What a freak. She's actually an experienced first-tier gold immortal. A rare first-tier gold immortal who had survived dozens of eons in the heavenly cycle world. An old witch who is only one step away from stepping into the realm of primordial. Tisk, apart from Lady Dark Goldwater, Dark Yin True Water Palace has 18 gold immortals. The transformative Yin heavenly realm and the tens of thousands of heavenly realms around it are all under the jurisdiction of Dark Yin True Water Palace. And Lady Divine Water is an immortal official who has been appointed as an official. She's in charge of the 100,000 heavenly realms around it. She has a high position and great power, and she is indeed an incredible figure. Dark Yin Water Scripture, is this the technique cultivated by Lady Divine Water? Not bad at all. Is this the true face of this world? With Panga world as the core, the heavenly realms revolve around it in the boundless void? Sitting cross-legged on the broken jade platform, Wu Qi lowered his head and began to ponder with a frown. In the Scroll of Stealing, the shadowy figure had also described the true face of this world to Wu Qi. Panga world was a complete world, extremely vast, with only one lonely continent. At all times, it was absorbing the source energy of the universe, expanding its size. Panga world was boundless, with endless resources and natural energies, and countless strange and peculiar creatures. It was created by the ancient great Saint Pangu at the sacrifice of his own body, a blessed land for all living beings to multiply and grow. When Wu Qi came to this world, he instinctively discovered that this world was completely different from the Pangu world in the shadowy figure's memory. Therefore, he was not sure where exactly he had come to. But now, after obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, and comparing it with the knowledge passed down to Wu Qi by the shadowy figure in the Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi finally confirmed the world he was in, Panga world, also known as the Immortal Realm, Heaven Realm, or any other random names. In short, this was the place he was in. Obviously, the shadowy figure was extremely ancient, many times more ancient than Lady Dark Goldwater's master. According to the shadowy figure, there were countless almighty experts living in Panga world, and at that time, in order to manage the universe, they were preparing for the Celestial Court. But, according to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, the Celestial Court was an extremely ancient authority. Although it had gone through countless wars, and many celestial emperors had fallen in the wars, the Celestial Court still stood strong, and was still an enormous power that ruled over Panga world nominally. The so-called universe, these heavenly realms of various sizes, were actually the land masses that fell off from Panga continent during the wars that occurred during the eons. They were transformed into stars by almighty experts, and they orbited around Panga continent. There were also some heavenly realms that were sealed in subspace, forming an independent world. However, the stars in these heavenly realms were also the land masses that fell off from Panga continent. This is the true face of this world today. Wu Qi swallowed a lump in his throat and grinned coldly. Chapter 359. After piecing together Lady Dark Goldwater's memories and comparing them with what the shadowy figure had told him in the Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi's understanding of this world had deepened, and he had also vaguely grasped some of the secrets hidden in this world. When the tremor in his soul had completely calmed down, Wu Qi took out a healing spirit pill and healed his body, which was severely injured by Lady Dark Goldwater. After that, he rose to his feet, walked to the bottom of the green jade dais, and stepped heavily on a pale green jade brick on the ground. The jade platform moved away soundlessly, revealing a hole with a circumference of about 10 feet. Without hesitation, he leaped into the hole, descended several hundred feet deep, and arrived at a quiet chamber that measured less than 100 feet in both width and length. The walls of the chamber were paved with fine jade, and countless patterns of rolling waves were engraved on its surface. Right in the middle of the chamber was a lone grayish-white hassock, and on top of it was a pile of broken bodies. Carefully, Wu Qi walked over, stood in front of the hassock, and bowed 3 times to the pile of dead bodies. Even if you have an evil intention, after all, we were master and disciple for 1 day and 1 night. I'll definitely avenge you, and I won't leave a single person in Green City alive. But, there is still an enormous amount of energy essence left in your body. Isn't it a waste to waste it like this? Piled on the hassock was Lady Dark Goldwater's fleshly body. However, the once beautiful lady's head was chopped off, her limbs were broken, and there were 7 transparent holes on her chest, from which a faint dark smoke was rising. Although her face looked as if it was alive, and the color of her skin and flesh looked exactly the same as a real human, this immortal body had lost all its vitality, and was emanating an aura of death that chilled one's heart. After bowing 3 more times to Lady Dark Goldwater, Wu Qi took out the phoenix fire pouch and refined Lady Dark Goldwater's body into blood crystals. 18,000 fist-sized, blood-red blood crystals with a faint purple tint on their surface were gathered in these blood crystals. They were all the remaining energy essence left in Lady Dark Goldwater's fleshly body. The power contained in each blood crystal was almost equal to the full cultivation base of a high-level heaven immortal. If Wu Qi were to consume one of them, his fleshly body would definitely explode on the spot. Carefully, Wu Qi placed the blood crystals into the black dragon spirit ring. After that, he gave the hassock another 3 kowtows. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Your soul has already dissipated. There's no point in keeping a broken body. It's just a waste of the remaining essence energy. I have no malice towards you. You were the one who acted recklessly and destroyed the last hope of rebirth. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Standing up, Wu Qi grabbed the jade futon. The pale gray cattail hassock felt cold in his hand. Wu Qi sent a wisp of his soul consciousness into it, and immediately, he received a counterattack from the immense soul consciousness inside the cattail hassock. The divine will that Wu Qi sent into the cattail hassock collapsed instantly. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and nearly threw the hassock away. The jade hassock was one of the 9 precious treasures that Lady Dark Goldwater carried with her, the Dark-Een hassock. It contained a wisp of Dark-Een true water aura, which could restrain inner devils. It was the nemesis of all Een flames, poisonous flames, ghost flames, demon flames, and fiend flames under the heaven. Unless it was the pure yang heavenly flame, all other flames would be restrained by it. When one was cultivating with the Dark-Een hassock as a cushion, he would be able to resist all the attacks from fiends and evil flames. Apart from that, the jade hassock could also be used to attack. Once it struck, it would turn into a pale gray tornado of ice and snow. It was bitingly cold, and contained 99 types of extreme Een water to attack the enemy. If an ordinary immortal was caught in the tornado, without a magical treasure that could restrain it, his immortal body would be frozen, and his immortal soul would be sealed in ice. Wu Qi did not know the immensity of the heaven and earth, and he was lucky that he was only rebounded by the divine will when he tried to retrieve the Dark-Een hassock. It was a magical treasure of a 6th-tier gold immortal, and the item spirit's cultivation base had reached a level that ordinary immortals could not even imagine. Wu Qi coughed out a mouthful of blood onto the Dark-Een hassock. Large sheets of white snowflakes shot out from the hassock, and a very strong Dark-Een water vapor burst out from it. Amidst the water vapor, a translucent item spirit, about 1 foot tall, shaped like a seahorse but with 6 pairs of transparent wings on its back, slowly rushed out. This beautiful creature had a pair of eyes that shone like 6 sapphires. He gave Wuqi a deep look, then said coolly, "Has Lady Jellyfish's soul completely vanished?" "I can sense that her aura has completely vanished." A tremendous cold pressure enveloped Wuqi. Wuqi's body turned stiff, not daring to make even the slightest movement. The feeling this item spirit gave Wuqi was at least 10 times stronger than the pressure from the broken soul of Lady Dark Goldwater. Shockingly, this item spirit had the cultivation base of a gold immortal as well. Although a spirit immortal cultivated by an item spirit did not have a fleshly body, and was greatly restricted, unable to unleash the overall strength that corresponded to his cultivation base, the spiritual pressure of a spirit immortal was not restricted. The immortal pressure of a gold immortal immediately suppressed Wuqi, rendering him unable to move. Clenching his teeth and staring at the item spirit of the Darkeen Hasek, Wuqi said in a deep voice, "Yes, she wanted to attach her true spirit to my soul, absorbing the energy of my soul to repair herself. However, I once had a fortuitous encounter, and subdued a thread of divine flame of order, hiding it in my spiritual ocean. She accidentally bumped into it, and her soul was destroyed." The little seahorse item spirit cried out in shock, "How could I encounter such an unlucky thing? But, it is not strange at all. After all, she was poisoned by her best friend, who she regarded as her life and death friend, and even had 99% of the spirit herbs and treasures in her palace taken away. It is only natural that she was unlucky enough to bump into the divine flame of order, an innate divine flame that specializes in hurting souls and divine will." The item spirit breathed out a long sigh, then shook its head and said, "Does that mean I'm free now?" Wuqi laughed dryly, nodded and said, "You are free now. You can go wherever you want, no one will restrain you, no one." Before he could finish, the item spirit of the Darkeen Hasek had already unleashed a nearly corporeal divine will, circling around Wuqi's body. Frowning, he said, "The aura emanating from you is a little strange." Did I sense it wrong? There is no mistaking it, it is that aura." The item spirit sprung up into the air and circled around Wuqi twice, then cried out loudly, "Hey, kid, do you have anything strange with you?" Countless thoughts flashed across Wuqi's mind in an instant. "What strange thing?" he asked with a deep voice. The item spirit shook its head and circled around Wuqi a few times, then suddenly plunged into Wuqi's body. Wuqi felt a bone-piercing cold airflow quickly circulating a few times in his body, flowing through his main meridians, then plunged into his spiritual ocean. All of a sudden, he heard a joyful laughter coming out from his spiritual ocean. "It is indeed the innate water. Kid, you have a precious treasure with you, yet you are asking me." In his spiritual ocean, the item spirit plunged into the vast ocean that stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, swimming quickly and comfortably in it. The item spirit heaved a long sigh and said, "Innate water. With its nourishment, I may have a chance to transform into an innate spirit treasure. At that time, I'll be able to get rid of this damned identity of an item spirit and become a true immortal. I won't have to work like a slave for someone else for the rest of my life." The item spirit flapped the 6 pairs of wings on its back excitedly, while beams of bright gleam shone from its eyes. At the same time, the Darkeen Hasek in Wuqi's hands spun and flew up, transforming into a clump of strong grayish-white light and fusing into Wuqi's forehead. Soon, the Darkeen Hasek appeared in Wuqi's spiritual ocean, unleashing a large sheet of grayish-white cold air that enveloped Wuqi's spiritual ocean. The item spirit laughed aloud and said, "Kid, how about we make a deal? Give me 70% of the innate water energy produced in your body in the future, and when your overall strength reaches the level of a gold immortal, I'll let you control me. What do you say? 70% of the innate water energy in exchange for a promise from the Darkeen Hasek?" Wuqi's mind raced, and he immediately said, "Okay." The Darkeen Hasek laughed out loud, humming a little tune, swimming a few laps in the vast ocean manifested in Wuqi's spiritual ocean, and then fell asleep happily. Sure enough, 70% of the innate water energy produced in Wuqi's spiritual ocean flowed into his body. Every time the innate water energy fused into the item spirit's body, the light of the Darkeen Hasek became softer, and its color gradually became lighter. Now that we have reached an agreement, how should I address you in the future? Wu Qi asked in a deep voice. The item spirit opened his eyes and was stunned for a long time, then he frowned and said, I had a name when I was still a living thing. After my soul was forcibly taken by Goddess Divine Water and refined into an item spirit, I forgot what I was called. Goddess Jellyfish usually calls me Hasek. You, just call me Hasek. Hasek said coolly, since I have lost my life, and my soul has been refined into an item spirit, things like names are not important anymore. The voice of Hasek was very cold, filled with a faint sorrow and longing. Wu Qi remained silent for a while, and only then did he send a comforting message back to Hasek with his soul. Ignoring Wu Qi, Hasek closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. After a long time, as if he was talking in his sleep, he murmured in a low voice, if I can turn it into a primordial spirit treasure, I will be able to rebuild my nascent embryo, and become a complete life again. Wu Qi did not say a word for a long while. This Darkeen Hasek was easy to get along with, at least much easier than its former owner, Lady Dark Goldwater. Moreover, it was not a greedy and evil item spirit. It was just living in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, absorbing the innate water energy for its evolution. If it were some other evil being, perhaps its first thought would be how to kill Wu Qi and take the innate water energy for itself. But after encountering Hasek, Wu Qi once again reminded himself that he had to be extra careful in the future. This time, he had met Hasek, so he behaved himself. But what if he met an evil item spirit next time? However, not all item spirits could sense the innate energy in Wu Qi's body, right? Wu Qi stared at the Hasek, at the seahorse with 6 wings and 6 eyes. According to the Scroll of Stealing, it was a great ocean biwu, ranked as the 4th tier among all the strange creatures in the universe. When cultivated to the limit, it could become a primordial immortal. This strange creature had a very strong ability to sense all water element energies found in the heaven and earth. So, it was not surprising that he could sense the innate water element aura in Wu Qi's body. Perhaps there were less than 5 such creatures in the entire universe, and Wu Qi was not worried that too many people would know about the secret in his body. But, I still have to work harder in my cultivation. When I have the overall strength of a heaven immortal, as long as I exercise the aura concealing technique found in the Scroll of Stealing, even the great ocean-splitting centipede will not be able to sense my aura. While Wu Qi was immersed in his thoughts, a shrill and long howl was suddenly heard coming from the outside. Chapter 360. The miserable shriek that came from the outside came from Zhao Kuo. Hastily, Wu Qi ran out from the heavenly water dark palace. When he stood on the edge of the huge jade lotus leaf and looked out, he saw Zhao Kuo, Yan Qijuan, and the others soaked in the vast heavenly Yin true water, their bodies covered in frost. Yan Qijuan and the others had long fainted due to the extreme cold, and only Zhao Kuo still had some strength left. He was floating on the surface of the water, shivering and screaming, "Help! I'm going to die. Help me!" Zhao Kuo's screams were extremely tragic. Every time he screamed, it sounded like hundreds of wild boars were stabbed in the buttocks at the same time. His screams shook the surrounding water, causing large ripples to form on the surface of the water. However, every time he let out a cry, his body would tremble for a while. He had to endure this period of trembling, and only when he had a little bit of strength left, could he let out the next cry. Wu Qi leaped down and landed on a huge lotus leaf right next to Zhao Kuo. He looked at Zhao Kuo, who was covered in a layer of frost and had his eyes rolled up, and said, "Don't worry, the heavenly Yin true water won't freeze anyone to death. Be it a mortal or a gold immortal, they won't die from the cold, but they will feel very uncomfortable. Be it a mortal or a gold immortal, they will feel the same. But, it is very beneficial to the body." Zhao Kuo stared at Wu Qi, his body trembling. His brain was so frozen that it was nearly frozen together. His mind was completely blank, but instinctively, he opened his mouth and let out another loud cry, "Help! Help! I'm going to die." With a wry smile on his face, Wuqi pulled out a handful of aerial roots that were as thin as hair from the thick stalk between the lotus leaves, then plucked the pomegranate-shaped fruits hanging from them. These fruits were called heavenly yin fruits, and could only grow and reproduce in the heavenly yin true water. They had only one effect, and that was when tempering one's fleshly body or immortal body with the heavenly yin true water, it would increase the pain suffered by the body by 100 times, thus strengthening the fleshly body and immortal body by 100 times. With a cruel smile on his face, Wuqi pried open Zhaokuo's mouth, shoved a heaven yin incense into his mouth, then shattered it into pieces with a flick of his finger. The sticky, light blue liquid slid down Zhaokuo's throat and into his stomach. Zhaokuo opened his mouth, intending to let out a miserable howl. But, before he could do so, he fainted because of the pain brought by the cold. Without saying a word, Wuqi stuffed a heavenly yin fruit into the mouths of Yan Qijuan and the other old demon kings. In an instant, Xiong Wanling and the other old demon kings, who were still moving a little, fell unconscious. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then the spirit-breeding ring burst out with a large sheet of white light. In the next moment, 10,000 longbow men, Gold Horn and Silver Horn, and Chi-Chi were thrown into the heavenly yin true water. Dragon Essence. Wuqi turned to Long Yuan, the leader of these longbow men, and said, "Exercise your ancestral cultivation technique and absorb the water here into your body to temper your fleshly body. It will bring you great benefits. Before you exercise your cultivation technique, each of you pick 10 fruits and eat them." Long Yuan answered with a low, muffled voice. Bringing all the longbow men, they plunged into the bottom of the pool, sat down cross-legged, and began exercising their cultivation technique. Before they exercised their cultivation technique, they followed Wuqi's instruction, picking 10 heavenly yin fruits and swallowing them into their stomachs. Very soon, these longbow men's bodies were covered with a thick layer of ice, and they were knocked out by the cold. However, the fleshly body of these longbow men was simply too strong. Although they were knocked out by the cold, and their souls were frozen, the enormous energies in their meridians were still circulating. The two great pythons, Gold Horn and Silver Horn, fell into the water as well. Silverhorn happily swam crazily in the heavenly yin true water. He was born with the nature of yin, so even though the heavenly yin true water made his whole body feel unbearably painful, he could clearly feel the great benefits that the heavenly yin true water brought to his body. Therefore, he happily swam in the water. On the other hand, Gold Horn was very straightforward. Right after he plunged into the water, he immediately turned into a long frozen snake and sank straight into the bottom of the pool. Vaguely, there was a red light bursting out of Gold Horn's body. His innate ability was actively protecting him. Wuqi scolded him and asked Silver Horn to take care of his elder brother, while also making them swallow a few heavenly yin fruits. Therefore, Gold Horn howled in pain, struggled for a moment, and fainted. On the other hand, Silver Horn, who did not take it seriously at first, also fainted after swallowing a few fruits. The heavenly yin true water was a miraculous true water that treated both mortals and gold immortals equally, and could make them faint from the extreme pain. When the pain was magnified 100 times, even a primordial immortal would faint from it, let alone these people around Wuqi. Looking at these poor men who had fainted from the cold, Wuqi burst out laughing. The heavenly yin true water was a rare and precious substance under the heaven. It had a cold nature and was extremely condensed. Its unique effect was that, like a blacksmith quenching fire, it could remove the impurities from one's fleshly body and immortal body, strengthening the fleshly body. The fleshly body tempered by the heavenly yin true water was at least 3 times stronger than that of a cultivator of the same realm and cultivation base. Naturally, the amount of energy it could contain was also a few times greater. If a cultivator could stay awake and carefully temper his entire body with the heavenly yin true water, he could strengthen his fleshly body by at least 100 times. This was an extremely frightening effect, as it basically meant that he would be invincible within the same realm, as well as the possibility of challenging those who were stronger than him. The reason why there was so much heavenly yin true water outside Lady Dark Goldwater's temporary imperial abode was because of the huge vase on the roof of the Heavenly Water Dark Palace. The vase was also a rare and good treasure. Over the years, it had been absorbing water element energy, producing such a large area of heavenly true water. He raised his head and gave the huge vase a look, then swallowed 10 heavenly fruits in one go, as well as a total of 30 blood crystals refined with the fleshly body of a heaven immortal. After that, he exercised the dragon transformation script and plunged into the heavenly true water, sinking deep into the bottom of the pool. A clump of dark mist rushed out from his side, transforming into a ferocious flood dragon. It threw its head back and gave a long roar into the sky. Immediately, the bone-piercingly cold heavenly true water in the surroundings rushed into Wuqi's body like birds flying into the woods. Amidst a series of cracking noises, countless cracks appeared on Wuqi's skin, and the biggest piece of his skin was the size of a sesame seed. Wisps of dark blood rushed out from Wuqi's body, bringing with them a pungent stench as they were quickly purified by the rolling heavenly true water. A huge amount of sticky and cold heavenly true water rushed into Wuqi's body, filling every single cell in his body and soaking him in the extremely cold heavenly true water. Wuqi let out a painful howl and nearly fainted like Xiao Kuo and the others. However, the heaven immortal blood crystals he swallowed exploded inside his body like a bomb, sending an endless stream of heat surging through his entire body. A dazzling golden light burst out from Wuqi's body. Amidst the blinding light, his skin suddenly turned into nothingness, exposing a clump of bloody flesh. The golden light converged on the surface of Wuqi's body, and his skin began to grow back quickly. Amidst a series of cracking noises, all the tendons, bones, blood vessels, muscles, and internal organs in Wuqi's body were being run through by the scorching stream of dragon transformation script, which came with a trace of wild and untamed aura. Abruptly, Wuqi's body expanded to 1 foot tall, and a faint dragon scale-shaped halo emerged from under his skin. The heavenly true water swirled and was injected into Wuqi's body. Dark and foul-smelling blood kept spraying out from his body, while an aura that felt ancient, and like that of a great beast from the primeval times kept spreading out from his body. The strength of his body was increasing rapidly, while his meridians and acupoints were strengthened by several dozens of times. The energies that filled his meridians immediately became as insignificant as a small stream in a dried-up river. Wuqi opened his mouth and swallowed another 30 heaven immortal blood crystals. An even stronger stream of heat flowed quickly through his body, while all 10 innate Jin Dan were absorbing energy essence at full speed, transforming into enormous innate energies that circulated around his body. While silently exercising the 7 foundation establishment technique to improve the grade of Jin Dan, replenishing the energies in his body and improving the strength of his fleshly body, Wuqi divided his mind and multitasked his mind. By carrying out a few steps at the same time, his overall strength was improving at a steady pace. In his dantian, apart from the nascent soul cultivating with white cloud immortal sex energy unity technique, a new Jin Dan was gradually taking shape. The new Jin Dan had a grayish-white hue, and was emanating a threatening cold air. Using the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, and the divine ability of stealing the sun, Wuqi had once again formed a false core specially used for cultivating the dark water scripture. Theoretically, with the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, as long as Wuqi's nascent divinity was strong enough, he could cultivate with an unlimited number of cultivation techniques. The dark water scripture was a top-grade cultivation technique, and when cultivated to its limit, it could even give birth to an innate ice flame. No matter how hard White Cloud Immortal Sex Energy Unity technique was, it could not be compared to the dark water scripture. Therefore, naturally, Wuqi would not let go of this cultivation technique. As he had inherited all the experiences from Lady Dark Goldwater, Wuqi kept breaking through his cultivation with an irresistible force. In just a few hours, supported by the enormous energy from the Heaven Immortal's blood crystal, the grayish-white Jin Dan in Wuqi's dantian suddenly cracked open, from within which, a nascent soul with a pair of blank eyes and shrouded in a strong cold air sprung out. Wuqi's nascent divinity moved, injecting a thread of his divine sense into the false core. An enormous amount of energy kept being injected into the false core, pushing it to the peak stage of nascent soul realm in just a blink of an eye. At the same time, driven by the enormous heaven immortal energy essence, 10 innate Jin Dan S in Wuqi's stealing heaven meridians in both of his arms burst out with a dazzling golden light at the same time. The 7 foundation establishment technique had finally reached the bottleneck of Jin Dan realm, and all 10 Jin Dan S had been pushed to the peak stage of Jin Dan realm. Just when Wuqi was about to strike the iron while it was hot and complete this stage of the 7 foundation establishment technique, pushing his cultivation base to another realm, the cold air outside his body was no longer there, and not a single drop of heavenly yin true water was sucked into his body. Surprised, Wuqi retracted his cultivation and opened his eyes. He saw that the heavenly yin true water within 1,000 miles circumference was completely gone, and all the heavenly yin fruits had withered and fallen to the ground. The 10,000 men of Longbow Kingdom, each standing several thousand feet tall, were staring blankly at Wuqi, as all the heavenly yin true water had been absorbed by these big, silly fellows. Wuqi's face turned stiff. He ran his divine will through the bodies of these Longbow men, and his expression became much better immediately. Although he had used up all the heavenly yin true water he had accumulated over the years, on average, the strength of these Longbow men's fleshly bodies had been improved by 15 times. What else could Wuqi not be satisfied with? Shaking his head, Wuqi threw a part of the heaven immortal blood crystals to Long Yuan, asking him to distribute them among his own people. After that, he put all the Longbow men back into the spirit breeding ring. At the same time, Zhao Kuo and the others had woken up because all the heavenly yin true water had been consumed. Right when Zhao Kuo opened his eyes, he threw his head back and cursed. Just as he was cursing happily, they suddenly felt their legs go soft, and the entire Shui Yuan planet began to tremble. A graceful and calm voice resounded through the heaven and earth, reaching into the ears of Wuqi and the others. I am MOD. Seniors, please make way for us. We come with no ill intentions. I am Sun Kuang. Seniors, please make an exception for us. We've come to Shui Yuan planet to look for our disciple. All of a sudden, a thunderclap rang out, and the entire Shui Yuan planet trembled slightly. Chapter 361. When he was done, Wuqi breathed out a mouthful of energy, which transformed into countless sword beams and swept across the place. The thick layer of Xian Bing on the surrounding rock walls shattered, as countless water element energy stones of various sizes shot towards Wuqi like a waterfall of light. With a sway of his body, all 18 celestial fiend puppets dashed out while laughing. They transformed into numerous afterimages and leaped in all directions, smashing and hacking at the surrounding rock walls. 2 heaven immortals and 2 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators had joined forces, and actually managed to put the 4 heaven immortals from Shui Yuan planet into a very difficult situation, panting heavily. Wuqi was watching the commotion from a distance, and could not help but twitch his lips. The name of this vase was Dark Yin Energy Vase, an innate spirit treasure of excellent grade. However, because it did not have an item spirit, its grade had dropped. This treasure was an expert in absorbing water element energy, and could transform it into 99 types of acquired true water, and the heavenly yin true water was one of them. Other types of acquired true water, such as those used in alchemy, fire extinguishing, flower watering, grass planting, fish rearing, and feeding livestock and demon beasts, could all be transformed by the Dark Yin Energy Vase. The only difference was that the hand incantation was different. The remaining 4 heaven immortals who were fighting with them were trapped by the silver mist, and the natural energy in the surroundings suddenly froze. The incantation of immortal magic they were preparing was interrupted, and the backlash of their immortal energy made them feel so uncomfortable that they nearly coughed blood. Bringing the 18 celestial fiend puppets with him, Wuqi flew all the way back, collecting energy stones along the way. There were too many energy stones, and the efficiency was too low. Wuqi had no choice but to release Long Yuan and the other Longbow men. With the help of these Longbow men, their brute force was endless. Their hard fists were like heavy axes and sharp blades, strong enough to break mountains and crack rocks. 10,000 Longbow men were running in all directions, fighting and causing the ground to shake. Large chunks of energy stones kept falling off, and were sucked into Wuqi's black dragon spirit ring. With this, the efficiency was increased by more than 1,000 times. Bringing 18 celestial fiend puppets and 10,000 longbow men, Wuqi plundered everything along the way. In less than 15 minutes, they returned to the valley beneath the main peak of Mount Tianlin from the underground space where the Heavenly Water Dark Palace was located. It had been more than 3 years since he last met these people. Mod and Sun Kuang gave Wuqi a great surprise this time. Mod and Sun Kuang were shrouded in a faint immortal aura, and the tricolored flowers had gathered above their heads. As they moved, the golden clouds of immortal energy could be vaguely seen. In the past 3 years, they had all transcended the lightning tribulations and broken through to the heavenly immortal realm. Mod, Sun Kuang, Su Qin, and Han Fei were fighting with 4 heaven immortals. On the northern side of Ji City, a towering murderous aura could be heard. The noises of fighting and miserable howls shook the entire Ji City. He did not have the time to calculate how many ice element energy stones he had plundered this time. Wuqi put away the formation discs and all the longbow men into the spirit breeding ring. Then, 2 great pythons coiled around his body. Shrouded in dark smoke and evil aura, he transformed into a beam of dark light and sped towards the direction where the thunderclaps and furious roars were coming from. However, controlling this heavenly water dark palace required an incredible amount of divine sense. Without the cultivation base of gold immortal, it was impossible to control it freely. So, Wuqi just put it away, and did not have the sweet dream of being able to control it easily. 3 miserable howls rang out. The bodies of 3 heaven immortals were nearly pierced through by Mod's sword. Coughing out a mouthful of golden blood, they spun and fled without saying a word. The poor cultivators of Shui Yuan planet did not have a strong cultivation base to begin with. When they were hit by the weapons specially made by Mo sect, before they could produce their defensive magical treasures, they were turned into nothingness amidst the crimson flame and golden light. Only 7 to 8 nascent soul cultivators managed to fly up into the sky, trying to flee. But, before they could fly far, Wuqi had already flown out from the sword of greedy wolf. Right after he stepped out from the teleportation formation in Ji City, he heard a deafening battle cry. Right at that moment, Mod dashed out. Holding a pitch-black, heavy, thick and square sword in his hand, which looked more like an iron stick, he slowly pointed it forward and said softly, "Love with impartiality, don't attack. If you don't attack, then attack." Then, he pointed the sword forward and caused the void before the chests of the 3 heaven immortals to suddenly collapse. While Wuqi was flying towards them, a heaven immortal who was fighting fiercely with Sun Kuang suddenly flew into a rage out of humiliation. He casually slapped a large, pitch-black gourd carried on his back. A flame flickered in the mouth of the gourd, as a plume of green smoke and yellow flame shot out with a foul stench, transforming into several hundred flaming pythons and thrusting towards Sun Kuang and the other 3 heaven immortals. Judging from the energy ripples emanating from them, they had both reached the peak stage of nascent divinity realm, and were only 1 step away from heaven immortals. Obviously, after cultivating the mystic technique of energy unity and receiving the guidance of orthodox immortals, these existences, whose intelligence could only be described as monstrous geniuses, had their cultivation base improved at a tremendous pace. The heaven immortal who unleashed the green smoke and yellow flame howled angrily. But, before he could retract the flame, Sun Kuang had already fixed his gaze on him with a pair of bright eyes. Sun Kuang extended both hands and grabbed at the surrounding void, clasping them together as he sighed softly and said, "There is a righteous energy under the heaven, and it is the righteous energy that slays all evils. Here, heart-calming and fiend-slaying immortal thunder of 4 directions." 14 wolf heads threw their heads back and let out a long howl. A beam of black light shot out and pierced through 8 nascent souls, causing them to howl miserably as they were sucked into the sword of greedy wolf. After tidying up the dark yin energy vase, Wuqi coughed out a mouthful of blood and sprayed it onto the exquisite heavenly water dark palace. The enormous heavenly water dark palace gradually shrunk, eventually turning into a tiny speck of light the size of a sesame seed, fusing into Wuqi's forehead and hovering above the vast ocean that measured several tens of thousands of miles in circumference in his spiritual ocean. This heavenly water dark palace was constructed by Lady Dark Goldwater's master using an enormous amount of natural treasures. It was filled with endless mysteries and restrictive formations. It was a palace that could be carried around with one's body, ensuring that one could have a comfortable and safe residence no matter where one was. Casually, Su Qin waved his hand at the surrounding void. Immediately, all the stars in the surroundings lit up. Su Qin said softly, "Heavenly star gathering spirit, star spirit scattering soul. Don't you know that a good dog does not block the way?" Abruptly, Su Qin raised his right hand up. A tiny prism shaped like a star was spinning rapidly in his palm. Countless silvery starlight shot out from it, transforming into large sheets of silvery light that sprinkled down. He changed into a black Taoist robe, revealed his true face, and exercised the Yin ghost technique taught to him by Princess Xianglu, causing a dense ghost aura to linger around his body. With that, Wuqi played the role of an evil fiend cultivator perfectly. He flew up and hovered above the heavenly water dark palace. Following Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, he subdued the huge vase with a restrictive technique, then shoved it into the black dragon spirit ring. Suddenly, a few pitch-black cannons on the planetary ship that looked like a city of ink suddenly shot out large sheets of crimson and golden light, smashing viciously onto the bodies of those Shui Yuan planet cultivators. Like thunderbolts, the golden light poured down with deafening booms. Relying on the support of a heaven immortal, several hundred Shui Yuan planet cultivators had been watching the battle from a close distance without any scruples. But, they did not expect that the heaven immortal would be defeated so quickly, and were immediately struck by the golden light. While Han Fei and Sun Kuang worked together to severely injure a celestial immortal, Su Qin and Mo Di didn't stop. Dark Radiance Planet had shut down the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation as well. Wu Qi's face blushed slightly. Hastily, he changed the topic and released Yan Qijuan and the others from the spirit breeding ring. A pitch-black planetary ship that looked like a city of ink was seen hovering in space. Sun Kuang, Mod, Han Fei, Su Qin, and all the renowned experts of Great Yan Dynasty were on board. A faint dark gleam was emanating from the ship, as a few pitch-black cannons of war machines were pointed at Shui Yuan planet. Several dozens of nascent soul cultivators of Great Yan Dynasty were controlling those war machines with incredible destructive power, deterring the surrounding Shui Yuan planet cultivators who came with ill intentions. Using the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, Feng Clan and Yu Clan, who had lost their patriarchs, were forced to open the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Very soon, they returned to White Cloud Planet. Using the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation constructed by Wu Qi on White Cloud Planet, they soon returned to Ji City. But, the energy stones stored here were simply too large. The greatest function of Heavenly Water Dark Palace was its ability to alter the surrounding energy veins in a small area, absorbing all natural energies and transforming them into energy stones of cold element. After several hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation, this underground space measuring over 1,000 miles in circumference was actually transformed by Heavenly Water Dark Palace. It was not hard to tell how many energy stones were stored here. Very soon, Wu Qi arrived several thousand miles away in the sky, 300 miles above the ground. Upon hearing the thunderclap, Wu Qi hastily exercised the spirit breeding ring and shoved all 10,000 longbow men back into it, who had obtained a great benefit. After that, Zhao Kuo and the others were sent back into the ring as well. Only Gold Horn and Silver Horn, the two brothers, were transformed into two large snakes, each about 10 feet long and as thick as a fist, and coiled lazily around his body. Before Sun Kuang could do anything, Han Fei, who had an expressionless face, murmured in a low voice like a child learning how to speak, as the saying goes, punishment does not apply to scholar officials. With a gentle shake of the jade scroll in his hand, he waved a golden writing brush in his right hand. The green smoke and yellow flames that were sweeping toward them suddenly paused, and then rolled back, burning the 4 heaven immortals and the people behind them into a sorry state. Let's go. Stop talking nonsense. Mod's face darkened, while Sun Kuang said coolly, don't blame us. A few days ago, Dark Radiance Planet, which is the closest planet to Shui Yuan Planet, suddenly shut down its only grand universal teleportation formation. Therefore, we had no choice but to come here through the Four Corners Planet, which is the closest planet to this planet. Despite our haste, it took us so many days to get here in the vast starry sky. The group did not dwell on what happened in Shui Yuan Planet any longer. They quickly boarded the planetary ship and left for Dark Radiance Planet. Amidst miserable howls and cries, a few cultivators clad in the robe of Bai clan from White Frost City were caught by the yellow flame. When the malicious yellow flame touched their bodies, it spread quickly, burning their flesh and skin. In just the time of a single breath, their fleshly bodies were burned into a pile of ashes. Countless energy stones shot out in all directions, then were wrapped up by Wu Qi's powerful divine will and sucked into the Black Dragon's spirit ring. Mod burst into laughter and said, Wu Qi, little fellow, have you rescued them? Wu Qi retracted the sword of Greedy Wolf and flew before Mod and the others. He gave them a displeased glare and shouted, since you possess such a strong cultivation base, and even a few heaven immortals were beaten to a pulp by you, why did you wait until today to come and help us? Streams of clear air rolled and rolled over from all directions, as a clump of immortal thunder, about the size of a human head and glinting with a green light, took shape in Sun Kuang's palm. With a wave of his hand, the immortal thunder transformed into a beam of golden light and shot out, smashing viciously onto the heaven immortal who carried a large gourd on his back. A loud boom rang out, followed by a deafening thunderclap. The black gourd on the heaven immortal's back shattered into pieces, while the heaven immortal himself was badly mutilated. Howling miserably, he transformed into a wisp of green smoke and fled at top speed. Chapter 362. When Princess Zhanglu, Jiang Xian, and Jiang Rui launched their attack, the current sect leader of Yu Academy, Yu Wendi, was having a rest in an abode at the back of the mountain. The heavy rain suddenly hit Ji City, and in just the time to finish a pot of tea, the water on the ground was 3 feet deep. The rainwater was mixed with a pungent stench of seafood. It was the stench of fish, shrimps, and some other strange and indescribable pungent odors. Ji City, which was once the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty, had suddenly transformed into an abalone restaurant. So, it was needless to mention the stench. Before both of them could react, 2 white thunderbolts, each about 1 mile in diameter, fell soundlessly from the sky, gently landing on Mount Jade Gate. Yu Wendi was lying on a soft bed made of incense wood, with a pretty little servant girl in his arms. He was gently playing with the long and straight legs of the little servant girl, whose face was blushing. Yu Wendi looked at a handsome and elegant young man, clad in a long robe, sitting opposite him, smiled and said, "Thanks to you, my dear nephew. Otherwise, I don't know how long this injury would drag me down." Princess Zhanglu was standing on the back of a giant sea turtle, whose back was over 100 feet in circumference. Fuming with anger, she brought her men and rushed towards the direction of Mount Jade, which was located at the north of Ji City. Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui, who had just gotten rid of the obscene poison in their bodies after Catfish Flood Dragon spat a few mouthfuls of cold and pungent saliva, were following right beside her, their faces filled with killing intent. Sitting on the chariot, Yan Dan was frowning as he pondered over the message that Princess Zhanglu had sent him. Ahead of them, Princess Zhanglu, Jiang Xian, and Jiang Rui had joined hands and launched an attack. Yu Wendi narrowed his eyes, sighed and said, "Since those immortals came here 3 years ago, undercurrents have been surging. He Ling, what do you think?" This action immediately shocked everyone in Great Yan Dynasty. Right after Princess Zhanglu brought a large army and charged out of Ji City, arriving at Mount Jade Gate, 100 miles to the north of Ji City, drums and horns were sounding in the imperial palace of Great Yan. Escorted by a large group of cultivators, a complete chariot of the emperor was seen chasing after Princess Zhang Li's army of seafood. Lord Xiansheng was following closely behind Princess Xianglu. Holding a large halberd in his hand, he kept sending out message talismans one after another, urging Wanying Dragon King to bring all the mighty experts and great demons from Longyuan River as reinforcements. Lord Xiansheng had only gone to the East Sea for a short period of time, so his foundation was not yet stable. He, Lao Tzu, Wanying Dragon King, had 3 great demons of nascent divinity realm, Han Zhu, Tan Shui, and Le Hai, as his subordinates. On the other hand, he, Lord Xiansheng, only had a few great demons of nascent divinity realm. All of them were alive and kicking, and all of them were the same as the seafood in the market. Yu Heling chuckled and said disapprovingly, "This is something that should be done. We have kept them in captivity for over 2,000 years, and it is time to release them. With their potential and disposition, as long as 3 to 5 of them can rise to a high position in the future, it will be a great benefit to us." 2 crystal-clear thunderclaps rang out. Without much commotion, the entire Mount Jade Gate was instantly turned into powder and drifted away in the wind. This group of demons and devils were used to fooling around in the East Sea, and no one restrained them with any military law. When several tens of thousands of seafood demons and devils swaggered across the sky above Ji City, some stubborn and mischievous demons and devils could not restrain themselves from exercising their innate abilities to summon wind and rain, rolling up dark clouds that blotted the sky and bringing up some sparse thunderbolts and lightning bolts that were not powerful enough to rain down the whole day. With a gloomy face, Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui exercised their energies and exercised the strongest thunder technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect, the White True Water Thunder Spell. Clouds were a form of mist, and as White Cloud Immortal Sect used White Cloud as their name, they were an expert in all kinds of water element cultivation techniques. The White True Water Thunder Spell was a technique that compressed water element energies, causing them to rub against each other at a high speed, turning them into violent thunderbolts to attack the enemy. Along the way, Princess Xianglu had put all the blame on Yu Academy. Therefore, at this moment, Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui flew into a rage out of humiliation. Filled with a bellyful of killing intent, they clenched their jaws and swore that they would slaughter every single member of Yu Academy, especially the culprit, Yu Qianqian. They would make her taste the cruelest torture in the cultivation world, and only then could they kill her slowly. Yu Heling laughed mockingly, shook his head and said, "Those elders have lived too long in peace, and have turned them into lambs. They no longer have the heroic and awe-inspiring attitude of their ancestors in the ancient times." On the other hand, although the cultivation base of these people from 6 dynasties is slightly lacking, every single one of them is a dragon and phoenix among men, a tiger, a leopard, a jackal, and a wolf. After being trained and tempered by them, those who return to their own clans from here are now being put in an important position. The young man chuckled and said, "That's right, they have gone out." Qianqian asked them for help, and they also want to see what kind of abilities these so-called heroes, ambitious and ruthless overlords have. They also want to see the results of their arduous cultivation over the years. That's why they rushed over. As for the 2 ladies, they hated Yu Qianqian to the core, who nearly made them lose their virginity. That was the reason why they desperately mustered all their energies, staking all their everything into a single pure water white thunder spell. It just so happened that Princess Xianglu was ready as well. Casually, she swung her sword and hacked forcefully towards Mount Yu. Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui snorted coldly as well. 2 white thunderbolts, which were only the size of a wicker basket, shot out from their mouths, and in just a blink of an eye, they had transformed into 2 white thunderbolts, each measuring about 1 mile in diameter, and shot out soundlessly. While both of them were chatting for a while, a strong light suddenly sprinkled down from the sky. Amidst a deafening thunderclap, a long sword, several tens of miles long and as thick as a thumb, hacked down from above, splitting Mount Yu into 2 halves. Thick smoke towered into the sky, as the defensive formation of Mount Yu was completely broken by the sword. All the students of Yu Academy who were diligently studying on the mountain were either killed or wounded. Yu Heling gave the surroundings a quick glance, then snorted coldly. With a blink of his body, he pulled out a strange-shaped machete and thrust it towards Princess Xianglu. The young man nodded, smiled, and said, "You're too polite, uncle. The injury is not a big deal, and with all the contributions you've made over the years, all you need to do is to choose a beast soul of excellent quality to fuse with when you return. With that, any injury will be healed." Mount Yu was the base of Yu clan of Great Yen Dynasty. Yu Academy was built on the mountain, and that was why it was named Mount Yu. It stood no more than 1 mile tall, and measured several tens of miles in circumference. The front of the main peak was filled with layers of dark green palaces and pavilions. It was the place where the students of Yu Academy studied. Meanwhile, a few exquisite and elegant pavilions could be seen at the back of the mountain, where the teachers of Yu Academy usually stayed. Touching her buttocks, Catfish Flood Dragon clenched her jaws and said, "Bald-tailed dragon. If this name is spread out, it will be a disgrace." Yu Hada smiled faintly. He squeezed the girl's breast and said in a low voice, "Hada, Hetien, and the others have gone out?" Catfish Flood Dragon was standing excitedly on the back of a huge seahorse, glancing left and right. She rolled up her sleeves complacently and said with a loud laugh, I've brought an army of several tens of thousands of soldiers to beat someone up. Now that's what I call awe-inspiring. As for that little girl named Yu Qianqian, let me eat her up. Even my tail has been broken by those people she brought here. I'll definitely avenge her." An auspicious 5-colored ray spread out from Princess Zhang Li's body, gradually enveloping an area of 100 miles in circumference. Dark clouds rolled and rolled, covering the ground with a thickness of 10 miles, stirring up the foul wind and dark clouds that were stirred up by the sea demons. Thunderbolts as thick as a water tank were seen rolling and rocking amidst the dark clouds. The deep, muffled rumbles of thunder shook the ground violently, and tiny cracks began to appear on the surface of Mount Yu. Yu Heling was flying at an incredible speed. Before Princess Xianglu could see the approaching blade beam, it had already arrived before her face. Although it was possible for these little demons to ride on the cloud, they still maintained their original form of fishes and shrimps, just that their bodies had become much bigger. For a moment, the sky above Ji City was shrouded with dense demonic clouds. Water vapor towered into the sky, and the smell of fresh seafood drifted to a distance of several hundred miles. Standing on the ground and looking up into the sky, one's eyes were filled with lobsters, hairtails, and turtles of various sizes. Mixed among them were some great demons who had the heads of seafood, and barely had the body of a human. There were also some sea demons who had attained the cultivation base of nascent soul realm, and had taken the form of a human. An enormous natural force surged into Princess Zhang Li's body. Her eyes shone with a faint 5-colored gleam. Once again, she had entered the state of enlightenment that all cultivators could only dream of. She slowly clasped her palms together, and a thunderbolt burst out from her palms, condensing into a blue sword that measured several tens of miles in length and was only as thick as a thumb. The sword was formed entirely from powerful electric currents, and from time to time, it would produce loud crackling noises. Mount Yu City was rich in natural energy, and the scenery was beautiful. On top of that, the back of the mountain was quiet and pleasant, and it felt like spring all year round. Because of that, Yu Wendi was severely wounded by Wu Qi with a crossbow in the middle of a snowy night. Because of that, he was unable to walk freely, so he left Yu Clan's mansion in Ji City and stayed in an abode located at the back of the mountain. Princess Xianglu rushed back to Ji City in a threatening manner, followed by several hundred cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect. Together with Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon, the hundreds of thousands of prawn and crab soldiers under the lead of them, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon. Among these prawn and crab soldiers, only a few of them had the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. Most of them had just stepped onto the Tao of cultivation, and had learned how to speak human language. The nature of the water thunder was soft and gentle, and the force of the thunder could penetrate the insides of any object. Therefore, the true water white thunder spell was best at attacking a mountain gate protected by a defensive formation. When the thunder exploded on the defensive formation, the force of the thunder could penetrate the formation and hurt the person inside. If it was used to hit someone, the person would look perfectly fine on the outside, but the inside would be smashed into a clump of blood. The five-colored divine ray behind Princess Zhongli's back soared to the height of half a sky, blanketing an area of 10 miles in circumference. Immediately, the natural energies within the area of 1,000 miles began to roll and roll rapidly. Large patches of dark clouds began to roll and roll over, with bolts of lightning twisting and darting amidst the dark clouds. Deep, muffled thunderclaps shook Mount Yuanqiqi. With all her concentration, Princess Zhonglu exercised the cultivation technique inherited from her bloodline. The bun on her head was loosened, and her long hair flew up into the sky one after another. They danced and wheeled in the air, bringing together countless magnificent five-colored halos. Yuheda left the little maidservant in his hand and fled into the sky in a panic. Among the several tens of thousands of disciples of Yu Academy on Mount Yu, only he and Yu Heling managed to make it out alive. Yu Heling sprung up into the sky, while the soul of a golden rock flew up into the sky and let out a clear cry. Spreading her palms, Princess Zhonglu floated up into the sky and flew into the dark clouds that were getting denser and denser. Then, she opened her mouth and began to sing an ancient, monotonous melody that repeated back and forth with the same rhythm. However, as Princess Zhonglu continued to sing, the monotonous melody began to have countless changes. It was as if an inconspicuous, pitch-black seed was buried underground, and had begun to sprout, shoot out branches, grow leaves, and blossom flowers, emanating an endless life force. Yu Wendi nodded and said with a smile, "That's true. Speaking of which, they are indeed extraordinary. The disciples of our clan have been fighting and scheming with them for many years in Ji City, and each of them has made a great progress. No matter it is in dealing with people or scheming, they are much stronger than the elders of our clan." Chapter 363. When the machete was still 3 inches away from Princess Zhongli's neck, a white beam of light, as thick as a fist, came shooting over from an angle, slamming right into Yu Heling's body. The white beam pierced through Yu Heling's body, leaving behind a hole the size of a human head. Yu Heling let out a miserable howl as his body was sent flying up into the sky by the white beam of light. Only after flying several tens of miles up in a sorry state did he manage to stop himself. Not allowing Yu Heling to see who was the one who wounded him, Princess Zhonglu clenched her teeth and flipped her wrist. With a casual flip of her wrist, the long sword condensed from countless heavenly thunders gracefully swept across Yu Heling's body. As Yu Heling did not have a spirit item for self-defense, the long sword landed squarely on his body and produced a large amount of sparks and blinding light. The sword, which was so powerful that it could split Mount Jade Gate in half, was slicing inch by inch at Yu Heling's body with great difficulty. It took 3 whole breaths of time before it managed to chop off one of Yu Heling's calves. Blood splashed and splattered in all directions, while Yu Heling howled hoarsely and painfully. His right chest was pierced through by the white beam, and his left calves were chopped off by Princess Zhonglu. The sudden severe injury nearly knocked him out. He roared hoarsely, "How dare you hurt me? You are simply lawless. Under the heavenly Tao, who dares to hurt me?" The white beam of light rose once again. Expressionlessly, Jing Ku transformed into a blinding beam and pierced through Yu Heling's head. Pop! Yu Heling's head was crushed, and his blood sprayed and blotted the sky. Yu Heling had not cultivated the Jin Dan, and he did not have a nascent soul or nascent divinity. It was just his initial 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls that were shattered by Jing Ku. When his mortal soul was shattered, the soul of the rock that had fused with his mortal soul did not have the time to unleash its divine power. Instead, it let out a miserable cry and exploded into countless golden specks of light. Then, another jade-colored beam rushed out from Yu Heling's body. Once again, the voice howled and roared, saying that no matter who killed his son, he would make the person who killed his son die a horrible death. However, this jade light didn't even have a chance to launch an attack this time before it was shattered by a gray spiritual light that Yen Dan shot out. Princess Zhonglu clenched her teeth as she stared at Yu Heling's falling body. She snorted coldly and said, "Who are these people? That shameless person is the same as you, talking about the heavenly Tao. Is killing you going against the heavenly Tao? How ridiculous. I don't see the heavenly Tao sending down a lightning tribulation to strike me. Hovering in midair, Yu Wendy stared blankly at the flattened Mount Yu. He yelled at the top of his lungs, clenched his fists tightly, and ran towards Yan Dan's chariot, which was rushing towards him at top speed. Your Majesty, what crime has Yu League committed? Why did you exterminate the entire Yu Academy? The chariot pulled by Yan Dan and the 3 strange black birds flew up quickly. Sitting on the chariot, Yan Dan coldly looked at Yu Wendy, who was hovering in midair, and said with an indifferent tone, I didn't think that Master Yu would have a pretty good cultivation base. All these years, I've made a wrong judgment. Yu Wendy was taken aback. He lowered his head and looked down at his feet, and saw that he was hovering about 1 mile above the ground. For a long time, Yu clan of Great Yen was famous for being an ordinary person who only knew how to read and write. The people of Yu clan had never revealed their cultivation base in front of others. Even when he was ambushed by Wu Qi with a crossbow, Yu Wendy had used an immortal talisman that Yu Qianqian found by chance, which could automatically protect himself. Now, when faced with Yan Dan's question, Yu Wendy was stunned for a moment, then he said angrily, Is this the reason why Yu League was exterminated? Princess Zhanglu, whose eyes were flickering with a faint 5-colored gleam, was still immersed in the state of enlightenment. Her voice was cold and emotionless as she slowly descended from the dark cloud. She hovered next to Yan Dan's chariot and said coldly, Yu Wendy, don't tell me that you don't know what that bitch Yu Qianqian has done. Yu Wendy's voice trailed off. What did Yu Qianqian do? He knew it very well. Furthermore, he did not object to Yu Qianqian's previous methods, which seemed to be too aggressive and violent. In Yu Wendy's opinion, intense conflicts were also a method to train his disciples. However, he never expected that Princess Zhang Li's reaction was so intense that it was beyond an ordinary person. She actually resorted to the most direct and violent method and destroyed Yu Academy. Yu Wendy stared blankly at Princess Zhang Li, sighed and said, What did Qianqian do? I've been recuperating in seclusion these days, and I didn't pay much attention to what Qianqian did. If she has offended you in any way, please forgive her, Your Highness. But, no matter what Qianqian has done, the sins of Yu Academy are not worthy of death. Princess Zhanglu said indifferently, she brought a man named Yu Hetian with her, and tried to offend me by force, seizing my true yin energy so that he could cultivate his cultivation technique. Yu Wendy, Yu Qianqian is bold enough to offend your superiors, and her actions are akin to treason. She deserves to have her entire clan executed. Take your own life, and I'll kill all your clan members in G City for you. You don't have to thank me. Yu Wendy was so angry that he nearly coughed out blood. Pointing his trembling finger at Princess Zhanglu, he suddenly cried out hoarsely, You've destroyed the foundation of Yu Academy. I'll fight you to the death. Before his voice could fade away, Qin Wuyang had already shot right next to Yu Wendy. Casually, he thrust his palm onto Yu Wendy's chest and shattered all his ribs. Qin Wuyang was a ruthless man. Grinning coldly, he pulled out a pitch-black iron chain that was covered with countless barbs. Using his fingers, he pierced the chain through Yu Wendy's shoulder blades, thrusting the chain into his shoulders and locking his ability to move. Yu Wendy shrieked in pain. However, before Qin Wuyang, who had an absolute advantage in overall strength, there was no room for him to struggle. Without hesitation, Qin Wuyang grabbed Yu Wendy's neck and dragged him to the front of Yan Dan's chariot as if he was grabbing a chicken. Then, he gave a heavy kick to Yu Wendy's knees and shattered them, forcing him to kneel on a clump of thin cloud. Yan Dan looked down at Yu Wendy from above, then said coolly, Over the years, there have been several upheavals in Great Yen Dynasty, and I suppose they are all related to Master Yu? For several hundred years, Yu clan has been making things difficult for Great Yen Dynasty all the time. I guess it's been hard on you. Yu Wendy's body trembled. He raised his head and cried out in shock, What did you say? I. Yan Dan waved his hand, sighed softly and said, Don't explain, and don't quibble. What I know is much more than what you think I should know. If not because I have the intention to use you academy to test the disciples of imperial clan, and use you to temper the ministers of the imperial court, how could I allow you to act so presumptuously for so many years? Master Yu, don't you find it strange? Why is Su Qin hiding in your editorial institute? Why is it that after so many years, although the number of disciples of Yu Academy in the imperial court is increasing day by day, none of them is able to hold a real position of power? You. With great difficulty, Yu Wendi raised his head and glared at Yan Dan. Yan Dan stared at Yu Wendi coldly and said, "There are some things that I can do, and I can tolerate. There are some things that I can't do, and once I do, I will have to pay the price. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, there are some lines that you can never cross. You tempted the disciples of Great Yan Imperial Clan to plot against and attack each other. That is because they are useless, and I can tolerate that. But, you are pushing your luck, and even attacked Zi Xian. So, is your next step going to assassinate me? This is something that I can't tolerate." Raising his right hand, Yan Dan grinned coldly and said, "Execute all the officials from Yu Academy, and execute all their clans with the crime of treason. Summon the disciples of Mo sect and Sun sect to replace the empty spots left by those depressed officials." Looking at the dumbfounded Yu Wendi, Yan Dan shook his head and said mockingly, "Do you really think that after leaving Yu Academy, Great Yan Dynasty can't even carry out the state affairs smoothly? You've underestimated Great Yan, and I, Yan Dan, am way too much." Jing Ku, Qin Wuyang, Tian Guang, Fan Yuqi, Yu Yi, and a few other captains of Great Yan bowed and received the order, and were about to leave with their men. Looking at Yu Wendi's pale face, Yan Dan suddenly laughed delightfully. Then, he transmitted his voice to Yu Wendi, "Do you know why I've tolerated you for so many years? Firstly, I want to use Yu Academy to temper the disciples of Imperial Clan. Secondly, after receiving the guidance from an immortal, my cultivation base has improved by leaps and bounds over the past 3 years. Vaguely, I can feel that the heavenly tribulation is just around the corner. Once I transcend the heavenly tribulation, I will become a heaven immortal." Suddenly, Yu Wendi laughed coldly like a madman. He stared at Yan Dan and said, "So what if you are a heaven immortal?" Yan Dan stared at Yu Wendi, nodded slowly and said, "A heaven immortal is indestructible." Yu Wendi stared at Yan Dan mockingly, keeping his mouth shut and not saying a word. The mocking gaze made Yan Dan fly into a rage. Grinning coldly, he said, "Zi Xian, send Master Yu on his way. Yu clan has been tossing and turning for so many years, and they must be tired. It's time for all Yu clan members to rest." A bright gleam flickered in her eyes. Princess Xianglu, who was still immersed in the state of enlightenment, nodded her head slowly. Then, she waved her right hand and chopped off Yu Wendi's head. Yu Wendi's head flew up into the sky. But, when his head flew up into the air, he let out a long laugh and said, "Kill all the members of Yu clan? Wipe out the 9 generations of my clan? Yan Dan, you will never be able to exterminate my descendants. Ha ha ha, death is nothing to me. When a man is born, he must die. This is the great Tao of the heaven and earth." Princess Zhongli's face darkened. A 5-colored divine ray burst out from both of her palms, grabbing tightly onto Yu Wendi's head and squeezing it lightly, crushing it into powder. After vanishing Yu Heda's soul with the 5-colored divine ray, Princess Zhonglu frowned and said, "Why don't I see Yu Qianqian?" While Princess Zhonglu was still talking about Yu Qianqian, a strong beam of light was seen approaching from the south. Amidst the bright beam, Yu Qianqian, whose dress was stained with blood and had a pale face, was seen flying towards them. From afar, she happened to see the scene of Princess Zhonglu crushing Yu Heda's head into pieces. A heart-wrenching and lung-splitting howl rang out, as Yu Qianqian cried out fiercely, "Zhonglu, you bitch! I'll fight you to the death for the rest of my life. Father!" Tears of blood rolled down her cheeks as a dark purple talisman flew out from Yu Qianqian's left hand, emanating a mighty evil aura. When the talisman left her hand, it immediately transformed into a huge dark cloud that measured several miles in circumference. Gradually, a dazzling dark gleam shone out from within the dark cloud, and after that, it shrunk inwardly and expanded rapidly, turning into a black hole that measured about 1 mile in diameter, hovering above Mount U. Shrill ghost howls rushed out from the black hole, as 4 dark green skinny claws suddenly stretched out from it, grabbing the edge of the black hole. A strong ghost aura that made one feel uneasy burst out from the black hole, as a ferocious and hideous ghost head, measuring over 1,000 feet in diameter, slowly squeezed out from the black hole. Yu Qianqian cried out fiercely, "This is the 9th heavenly ghost summoned from the ghost realm. All of you must die today." Amidst Yu Qianqian's shrill cry, a heavenly ghost that stood over 10,000 feet tall, shaped like a monkey, had a long tail, and was entirely dark green in color with black spots on its body. It was a ferocious and hideous heavenly ghost. Its hind legs were muscular, while its upper body had a pair of sharp claws that stretched over 100 feet long. Right after it dashed out from the black hole, it threw its head back and let out a long howl. Amidst the dark cloud, the army of seafood brought by Lord Xianqing exploded into countless clumps of blood and gore amidst the long howl. Chapter 364. What a tough skin, cried Wu Qi in astonishment. This heavenly ghost truly deserves its reputation. Princess Zhang Li's pretty face turned cold. Hastily, she told Wu Qi everything that had happened in the past few days. Amidst a shrill howl, the sword of greedy wolf stabbed right into the heavenly ghost's chest. Crack! A crisp noise rang out, as General Greedy Wolf was knocked several hundred feet back. A 1-foot-long, 1-inch-deep wound was torn open on the heavenly ghost's chest, from which a few drops of dark and stinking blood dripped out. The heavenly ghost did not suffer too much damage. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, unless one used the divine ability of Buddhist League to subdue ghosts, or the extremely rare Tranquil Cloud from Tao League, it was extremely difficult to kill these troublesome heavenly ghosts. Generally speaking, heavenly ghosts possessed the overall strength to challenge those who were 3 levels higher than them. In other words, an ordinary heavenly ghost with the cultivation base of 36th tier heaven immortal could challenge a 33rd tier heaven immortal by relying on its tough skin. What happened? Asked Wu Qi in shock as he stared at the strange phenomenon in the sky. Wu Qi smiled as he wrapped his arms around Princess Zhang Li's slender waist and said, "I'm fine. Not even a single hair of mine is hurt." Wu Qi could only laugh dryly. It was not just a single hair of his that was hurt, as he had nearly been killed a few times in Shui Yuan planet. Especially when he was tortured by Lady Dark Goldwater, the few kowtows that made Wu Qi throw up blood. But, how could he tell Princess Zhang Lu about this? Yan Qijuan, who had rushed over from behind Wu Qi, was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. This was the precious daughter he loved dearly. The heavenly ghost, who had a huge body but was extremely agile, let out a long howl. Suddenly, it turned its head and fixed its gaze at Wu Qi. When Wu Qi and his company walked out from the teleportation formation, a towering murderous aura filled the air near Mount Yumen. The howls of ghosts shook the city and knocked many common people to the ground. The sinecures of Great Yan's Cloud Swallow Pavilion had been dispatched, activating all the defensive mechanisms around Ji City. One after another, the defensive formations that were reinforced by the experts of White Cloud Immortal Sect rose up one after another. The invisible ghost howls smashed onto the defensive formations, sending out a large sheet of pale green light, as if a ball of ghost fire had enveloped the entire Ji City. Like living beings, these heavenly ghosts had the ability to mate and reproduce with each other. As a result, the number of heavenly ghosts on the fragment grew larger and larger, and one day, a great war broke out between them and other immortals and demons. As a result of the war, the ghost realm officially became an existence recognized by all factions. However, it was also sealed by the joint forces of the almighty experts. Heavenly ghosts below the strength of golden immortals could not freely enter and exit the ghost realm. All of a sudden, the sword exploded, and countless bolts of lightning exploded on Sky Ghost's body like flood dragons. The bolts of lightning shot in all directions, scaring many great yen cultivators who were besieging the heavenly ghosts and forcing them to flee in panic. However, a few unlucky cultivators of Jin Dan realm were struck by the bolts of lightning. Howling miserably, they fell to the ground with black smoke billowing out of their bodies, twitching violently with tiny sparks flying all over their bodies. Heavenly ghosts with the strength of gold immortals and above could barely control their instinct to devour life force, flesh, and blood. Therefore, they did not pose too much of a threat to other living beings. As for those heavenly ghosts with the strength of gold immortals and below, they mostly acted according to their instinct. If they were in the ghost realm, their instinct was to reproduce to their heart's content, and if they were in other galaxies or heavenly realms, their instinct was to hunt down immortals and mortals, devouring their energy essence, flesh, and blood. Ghost realm. Nether ghost realm. Heavenly ghosts. Those heavenly ghosts born in the ghost realm. Princess Zhanglu breathed out a sigh of relief when she heard Wu Qi say that he was not injured. Then, she thought of Yan Qijuan and asked, "What about my father? He is not dead, is he?" Wu Qi hugged Princess Zhanglu tightly. In front of Yan Dan, Yan Qijuan, and all the cultivators of Great Yen, he gave Princess Zhanglu a deep kiss on her red lips. Princess Zhanglu struggled weakly for a while, then gently smashed her little hand on Wu Qi's chest, and simply reached out her arms and wrapped them around Wu Qi's neck. Sun Kuang frowned and pointed his finger up into the sky. A beam of golden light shot straight up into the sky, then exploded into a dazzling halo that looked like a scroll. Very soon, 2 green beams came shooting over. 2 scholars clad in tall black crowns, white robes, and black boots landed in front of the crowd. They bowed to the sky and said, "Master, Princess Zhanglu has brought her men and razed Mount Yu men to the ground, slaughtering tens of thousands of people from Yu Academy, including the current sect leader of Yu Academy, Yu Wendi. Yu Qianqian has attracted the heavenly ghost from the ghost realm with a secret talisman, and is now engaged in a great war on Mount Yu men." Wu Qi's eyebrows shot up when he heard that, and a wave of anger rushed to his head. How could Yu Qianqian send someone to impersonate Lao Ai and plot against Princess Zhanglu? After a long and deep kiss, Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhanglu and threw her to the back. He laughed and said, "Zi Xian, stay at the back obediently. Let us men handle all the fighting and killing." "Ha, Yu Qianqian, you old virgin, Wu Qi is here." All of a sudden, the heavenly ghost let out a long howl. A green beam, several hundred feet in diameter, came smashing toward Wu Qi along with countless ghostly howls. The surrounding void suddenly turned dark, as if all the light had been sucked into the heavenly ghost's body. All the light within 1,000 miles had disappeared, leaving only a tall heavenly ghost hovering in midair, its body emitting a faint green glow. An enormous and bizarre pressure pressed down on everyone's heart. Apart from Sun Kuang and Mod, who were rushing to the scene from behind, none of them could move. Clenching his teeth, Yan Qijuan squeezed out a smile and said, "Zi Xian, father is safe and sound. It's all thanks to Wu Qi's help this time. Otherwise, father would have been killed." Staring coldly at Mount Yu, which had been completely razed to the ground, Yan Qijuan clenched his jaws and said, "My good daughter is indeed an obedient girl. She knows how to settle the score with Yu Academy. It is the people from Yu Academy who ordered those people to assassinate father." When fighting with the heavenly ghost, one could not fight it head-on. Instead, they could only attack it and entangle it, using the advantage of numbers to slowly wear it down. Then, Wu Qi let out a long cry. With 2 immortal talismans personally crafted by Patriarch Jiang Yun in both hands, he sped towards the heavenly ghost, who was displaying his might amidst the crowd of Great Yen cultivators. The heavenly ghost had a mighty strength, and its body was extremely tough. Although it did not use any Dharma spells or divine abilities, just a casual punch from its fleshly body could easily destroy the defensive magical treasures of Great Yen cultivators. Although the cultivators of Great Yen dynasty had resorted to guerrilla tactics, they were still forced to retreat. Princess Zhongli's attitude towards Wu Qi and Yan Qijuan was like the difference between heaven and earth. Whenever she asked Wu Qi, she would ask him if he was injured or if he had suffered any internal injuries. As for Yan Qijuan, she would just tell him that he was not dead. It gave people the impression that if Wu Qi only had one finger injured, it would be a terrible thing. As for Yan Qijuan, even if he was crippled, she would feel relieved as long as he was not dead. Upon hearing the news, Wu Qi was so anxious that he kept stamping his feet and cursing Yu Qianqian's 18 generations of ancestors at the top of his voice. With his eyes bloodshot, he soared into the sky and transformed into a dark beam, flying straight towards Mount Yumen. Wu Qi had a very good eyesight. Exercising the mystic eyes of universe, he could clearly see everything that was happening around Mount Yumen from a distance of 100 miles. He saw Princess Zhonglu holding a sword that measured several tens of miles long, slashing it forcefully onto the head of a heavenly ghost, who stood 10,000 feet tall and had a ferocious and hideous appearance. After obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, Wu Qi was no longer completely ignorant about this universe. The ghost realm was originally a part of Pangu continent. But, during a battle between countless immortals and fiends during a certain cataclysm, a very large piece of Pangu continent was shattered into pieces. The broken pieces drifted into the vast starry sky, and eventually fell into a clump of innate ghost energy left behind by the great Saint Pangu when he created the world. The eyes of Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan nearly popped out from their sockets. Especially Yan Qijuan, who was trembling with anger. Do you two still have any respect for me, your father and father-in-law? Don't you think you are too bold to do that in front of so many people? Yu Qianqian was standing right on top of the heavenly ghost's head, glancing coldly at the surroundings. Suddenly, Jing Ku transformed into a white beam and shot over, slamming onto the heavenly ghost's body with a loud clang. The dark green skin of the heavenly ghost was extremely tough. Although the white beam transformed from Jing Ku sent out a large sheet of white light, it only tore a small piece of skin about 10 feet in circumference on the heavenly ghost's lower abdomen, causing a few drops of dark and foul-smelling blood to ooze out. However, it did not really hurt the heavenly ghost's body. This innate ghost energy was the first thread of innate ghost energy. Just like all the other innate energies, it possessed an unimaginably magical power. On that fragment of Pangu continent, countless immortals and Buddhas who died tragically had awakened a few eons after their deaths. When they woke up, they had been transformed into ghosts, and their characters were influenced by the innate ghost energy, becoming sinister, treacherous, cruel, and violent. Upon hearing Wu Qi's loud laughter, Yu Qianqian's face turned even more unsightly. Subconsciously, she gave her dress that was stained with blood, then suddenly pointed her finger at Wu Qi and cried out hysterically, "Heavenly Ghost, kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" The sword exploded, and Princess Zhonglu spun and left without hesitation. A five-colored cloud was hovering under her feet, and the speed of the cloud was comparable to Wu Qi's acquired magnetic sword escape beam. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhonglu a look of astonishment, then casually threw out the sword of greedy wolf. Together with 14 wolf heads, each the size of a water tank, shrouded in a dark glow, they transformed into a pitch-black stream of light and thrust towards the heavenly ghost. Wu Qi cried out and told them the method he came up with on how to deal with the heavenly ghost. Sitting in the chariot off in the distance, Yan Dan gave out an order. Immediately, countless great yen cultivators changed their formation, following Wu Qi's method and began to attack the heavenly ghost. No longer did they have a head-on clash with the heavenly ghost. All of a sudden, the surrounding heaven and earth shook violently. The void cracked open, and countless ghost flames emerged out of thin air. The heavenly ghost threw its head back and let out a furious howl. Flustered and exasperated, it leaped tens of miles high into the sky with just one leap. Looking down from the sky, it swung its 4 long claws, trying to grab onto Princess Zhonglu. When Princess Zhonglu saw Wu Qi, she burst into a joyful laughter. Nimbly dodging the claws of the heavenly ghost, she spun her body and came next to Wu Qi, hugging his arm. Hastily, she ran her hands over Wu Qi's body, then gave Wu Qi a careful look. It's a good thing that you are not missing an arm or a leg, Princess Zhanglu said happily. Are you hurt? Do you have any internal injuries? Slowly, the heavenly ghost opened its mouth, within which was a blinding green light that was spinning slowly. Yu Qianqian had used a secret talisman to attract the heavenly ghost from the ghost realm. On the contrary, Jing Ku, who had transformed into a white beam of light, retracted his cultivation technique abruptly, covered his head with both hands and retreated hastily. His neck was twisted in an abnormal way. The heavy impact just now had dislocated Jing Ku's neck. Flustered and exasperated, Jing Ku cursed Yu Qianqian in a low voice, then ran back to the group of great yen cultivators behind him in a sorry state. A few tall and burly captains quickly came up to him, grabbing his head and twisting it. Chapter 365. When the ghost flame bumped into the yellow light barrier transformed from the earth element dragon's scale shield, it stuck to the barrier like a rotten meat paste. Amidst sizzling noises, the yellow light barrier and the ghost flame clashed and rubbed against each other, sending up a large sheet of stinking green smoke. When the nearby great yen cultivators accidentally smelled the stench, they rolled their eyes and fell to the ground. Their bodies turned black and stinking immediately, turning into rotten corpses. Some of them were even touched by the green smoke. Their defensive magical treasures and magical clothes were all turned into scrap metals, and their bodies were tainted by the smoke, turning into rotten corpses. Suddenly, a figure dashed over from the side. Qin Wuyang grabbed Yu Qianqian's nascent soul with one hand, and without saying a word, he shot out a stream of flame from his palm, burning the nascent soul and making it wail miserably. Yen Dan retracted the disc of heavenly Tao transmigration, gave Yu Qianqian a cold glare, and said with a sneer, "Bring her back. Use the art of soul searching, and find out all her memories." A mouthful of blood with a faint stinking smell sprayed out from his mouth, and Wu Qi was so frightened that he took a few miles back. No ordinary cultivator would take on the prime ghost flame of a heavenly ghost head-on, as it was no different from a bored and poor mortal jumping into a cesspool to take a bath. Staring at the approaching green ghost flame, Wu Qi twisted his wrist, shooting out a sheet of yellow light with a faint buzzing noise and wrapping him tightly within it. Before she could finish her words, Wu Qi opened his mouth and shot out a ball of earthen yellow light. It was the acquired earth spirit pearl that flew whistling through the air. Together with a tremendous magnetic force that blotted the sky and blotted the earth, it ripped Yu Qianqian's nascent divinity into pieces. "What are you talking about?" Wu Qi roared angrily. "She is just a woman, and her father has been killed. What is the point of keeping her alive?" Yu Qianqian roared furiously, constantly exerting the power of the golden talisman in her hand. Obviously, the talisman was an immortal talisman produced by an immortal. However, as Yen Dan had not hesitated to consume his prime energy to activate the disc of heavenly Tao transmigration, how could he allow her to escape with the help of a mere immortal talisman? Then, the 6 bright beams converged inwardly and rolled up. A muffled boom rang out, as Yu Qianqian's defensive golden barrier was ripped to shreds. An enormous pressure smashed onto Yu Qianqian's body, ripping her petite body into pieces. Her nascent soul soared up into the sky in a panic. The gigantic Sky Ghost's body suddenly sank. Hovering in midair, Sky Ghost was pulled down by a tremendous force and smashed heavily to the ground. Sky Ghost's body was heavy to begin with, and with the addition of the magnetic force, which was several tens of times stronger than the normal gravity, Sky Ghost's body sank several thousand feet deep into the ground. Before the Sky Ghost came back to itself, more and more complicated tides of gravity surged from the side, pulling and twisting the Sky Ghost's body. On the other hand, the several dozens of dragon-scaled golden beams flew back to Wu Qi feebly, swaying and swaying. The once dazzling golden light balls were now covered with a faint layer of green mist. The connection between Wu Qi and the dragon scales was weakening rapidly, and soon, he could no longer sense the existence of the dragon scales. Pop! Several dozens of cracking noises rang out, and the dragon scales were corroded into ashes. Only several tens of pure innate earth element energy essence flew back to the earth element dragon scale shield. Yan Dan's body shuddered abruptly, while Qin Wuyang's face fell. His fingers loosened abruptly. Without the protection of Sky Ghost, Yu Qianqian was as vulnerable as a little chick under the claws of a fierce tiger in Wu Qi's hands. A large sheet of crimson flame rushed out from Mod's body as he flew above Sky Ghost. Clumps of crimson flame transformed into countless fiery dragons and plunged down from the sky, burning the Sky Ghost's body and making it crackling noises. His skin was charred and his flesh was ripped open. The others had joined in as well. With Wu Qi using the magnetic force to keep the heavenly ghost at bay, the others used various spells to slowly wear down the heavenly ghost's ferocious aura and break its body. 2 hours later, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other heaven immortals, who were in secluded cultivation in Sang-ao immortal abode, arrived. Heavenly flame. Wu Qi cried out in shock. Heavenly flame of pure yang can deal with this guy. Sensing that things were not going well, Wu Qi quickly opened his eyes and opened his purple erect eye. A purple thunderbolt, about 10 feet in diameter, shot out soundlessly and collided with the ghost flame unleashed by the Sky Ghost. A muffled boom rang out as the thunderbolt exploded, creating a large hole several hundred feet in diameter amidst the sticky ghost flame. But, the ghost flame that came after quickly filled the hole and continued to smash onto Wu Qi's body. The incoming ghost flame sent a cold shiver down Wu Qi's spine. The ghost flame unleashed by the Sky Ghost was a wisp of its natal ghost flame, which was condensed from the evilest and filthiest ghost energy under the heaven when it was born. For cultivators from both the immortal and Buddhist sects, this kind of ghost flame was almost a natural enemy, and was best at polluting one's fleshly body and nascent divinity. When the ghost flame touched the relics of ordinary Buddhist cultivators, they would immediately fall to the ground and turn into dirt and rocks. With everyone working together, it took them 13 days of hard work before they finally turned the Sky Ghost into nothingness. Suddenly, Wu Qi's body flashed with a bright yellow light as he roared furiously. He had brazenly exercised the acquired magnetic divine ability he obtained from Zhang Yi. From the surrounding mountains, a large amount of yellow earthen mist spurted out, quickly merging into Wu Qi's body. A strong black light swept across the entire area. Within a radius of 30 miles around Wu Qi, a tremendous gravitational force suddenly appeared out of nowhere, twisting and twisting like countless invisible serpents, turning the originally chaotic natural energies into a complete mess. Wu Qi didn't dare to touch this ghost fire directly. As soon as his spiritual sense came into contact with the ghost fire, he felt a foul aura blowing on his face. It was filth that was millions of times dirtier than an old latrine pit that had been fermenting for 100,000 years. A part of his spiritual sense had already been contaminated and turned into stinking, drifting fragments. As Mod explained, he pulled out his simple and crude black sword and swung it forcefully at the heavenly ghost. Dozens of fire dragons danced and spiraled around the heavenly ghost along with the sword intent, burning it until it howled miserably and no longer had its ferocity from before. It kept spitting out green ghost fire in an attempt to turn itself around. But, as soon as it flew out, it would be burned into grayish-white smoke by the dark flame, and could no longer hurt anyone. Wu Qi snorted coldly. Inside his dantian, his nascent soul quickly mustered its energy, using the mystic technique of heaven-breaking sword sex unity of sword energy's script to condense it into a pure, fierce, and domineering sword energy. Driven by his powerful nascent divinity, 70% of his energy was quickly condensed into energy. Wu Qi spread his right hand, and suddenly, 5 sword energies, each about 1 mile long, shot out from his 5 fingers. The sword energies flickered, glinting with the colors of 5 elements, red, green, black, white, and yellow. They were glinting brilliantly, making them look like real entities, and were constantly producing sonorous sword cries. Before the crowd could catch their breaths, Patriarch Jiang Yun gave Mod and Sun Kuang a glance and said suddenly, "I didn't expect that in just 3 years, you've already secretly transcended your heaven immortal tribulation. Fine, summon everyone, let's go to Sang-ao immortal abode for a meeting." Only then did Yan Dan come to his senses. Clenching his jaws, he gave the tiny fluorescent specks left behind by Yu Qianqian's broken soul, who had her soul disintegrated, and cried out sternly, "My ministers, let's join hands and kill the heavenly ghost." The heavenly ghost raised its ferocious and ugly head, opened its mouth, and sprayed out another stream of ghost fire. Together with a pungent stench, the ghost fire spiraled out and collided head-on with the energy unleashed by Wu Qi. The air vibrated in the void, as loud swooshing noises kept ringing out. Large patches of ghost fire turned into sticky and stinking green liquid that dripped down from the sky, while the sword energies unleashed by Wu Qi were being corroded and melted inch by inch. In just 3 seconds, the sword energies unleashed by Wu Qi, which were 70% of his energy, were completely corroded. He quickly ran through all the cultivation techniques he had been cultivating, and none of them could deal with the heavenly ghost. Wu Qi's face darkened. With a shake of his wrist, he was about to unleash the spirit-restricting rope to bind the heavenly ghost. But, the spirit-restricting rope suddenly moved, and a clear message was transmitted into his mind: "Even if you kill me, I won't bind the heavenly ghost. It's too dirty, too disgusting, and even my true form will be contaminated. Unless it is an immortal item crafted by a gold immortal, any immortal item below the realm of gold immortal will be contaminated by the heavenly ghost." The sudden attack caught the heavenly ghost off guard. Even Yu Qianqian, who was standing on top of its head, cried out in alarm as her body was suddenly thrown up into the sky by a tremendous magnetic force that could not be resisted. Before the heavenly ghost and Yu Qianqian could react, Wu Qi shook his wrist, shooting out a golden dot of dragon scale. It flashed and disappeared in a flash, and Yu Qianqian let out a miserable howl as the golden dot pierced through her lower abdomen and flew out from her back. Because of Yu Qianqian's words, Mod and Sun Kuang, who were standing stiffly off to the side, struck out at the same time. Yu Qianqian's wicked laughter rang out, "Wu Qi, I'm going to teach you a lesson today. Zhang Lu, big sister Qianqian will feel sorry for you today. Hee, you've destroyed the foundation of Yu Academy and killed my father. I'm going to make you pay for this." The dragon scale was looted from Wanying Dragon King's mansion, and it was shed from a true dragon who had once ascended to the immortal realm. Yet, it could not resist the invasion of the heavenly ghost's filthy energy. Wu Qi was struck dumb. It looked like the spirit-restricting rope was right. Any immortal item of heaven immortal grade would be contaminated by the heavenly ghost's body, unless it was an immortal item of gold immortal grade. No wonder the heavenly ghost from the ghost realm was in existence that could incur the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the men. Wu Qi's heart sank slightly. He turned to give Yan Dan a look, and saw Yan Dan's expression change. Mod gave Wu Qi a look, nodded and said, "It is not the pure yang heavenly flame, but the ink flame that Mod has comprehended after spending many years harvesting the pure yang flame from the earth's core and crafting magical treasures. It is the purest and purest yang flame, and no gentleman will be hurt by it, while demons, fiends, and ghosts will perish upon touching it." Her lower abdomen was pierced through, and her dantian was severely wounded. That caused Yu Qianqian's cultivation base to slip away at an incredible speed. She cried out in shock, then suddenly shook her right hand and shot out a golden talisman, bringing Yu Qianqian along as they transformed into a golden beam of light, preparing to flee. However, before she could fly more than 1,000 feet into the sky, a huge wheel that was surrounded by 2 spirit lights of gray and white colors appeared out of nowhere above Yu Qianqian's head. 6 beams of spirit lights shot out from the wheel and tightly confined Yu Qianqian. Helplessly, Wu Qi stared at the approaching heavenly ghost, and could only retreat under the protection of the earth element dragon scale shield. Circulating the unity of sword chi technique, the sword chi spurting out from his 5 fingers suddenly condensed inwards. The 5 sword chi quickly condensed into one, turning into a thick, pure white sword chi without any impurities. Then, Wu Qi swung his arm and slashed forcefully towards the heavenly ghost, who was approaching from tens of miles away. The sword energy that was brewing on his fingertip shot out with a jarring noise, shooting straight towards the heavenly ghost's head like a flood dragon. Yu Qianqian howled miserably, then her nascent soul suddenly widened its eyes and cried out fiercely, Ji Dan, how dare you kill me? Do you still remember how you escaped from death in those years? Hehe, don't tell me that the reason why you clan is fighting against Great Yen is to seize the foundation of your dynasty? How dare you kill me? How dare you kill me? Wu Qi was taken aback. Then, he shook his wrist shield again, shooting out several dozens of golden dragon scales, their edges covered with a layer of cold white gleam, towards the heavenly ghost's huge body. Clang! Clang! Several dozens of tiny, transparent holes were opened up on the heavenly ghost's body. However, the heavenly ghost only threw its head back and let out a strange howl, and the holes were quickly healed by a thick layer of smoke. Chapter 366. Wu Qi did not attend the meeting in Sung Ao Immortal Abode. Those who went to Sung Ao Immortal Abode to have a meeting with Patriarch Jiang Yun and Qing Xian were the emperors of 6 dynasties, and their important ministers. They discussed for 3 days and 3 nights, and when Yen Dan and his company returned to Ji City, Wu Qi gave them a glance from afar in Duke Yen Li's mansion. Yen Dan's expression was solemn, yet there was a hint of happiness in it. Obviously, the result of the discussion was not bad. On the same night, Ma Yi personally came to Duke Yen Li's mansion and summoned Wu Qi into the palace to meet Yen Dan. Led by Ma Yi, Wu Qi passed through layers of palaces, and finally came to the thatched cottage where he and Lu Qingfeng first came to Ji City, where Yu Xian tested Lu Qingfeng's bloodline and decided to let Lu Qingfeng inherit the title of Duke Yen Lu. When he took off his shoes and entered the cottage, Wu Qi saw Yen Dan sitting cross-legged on a straw hassock, and Princess Zhang Lu was sitting right next to him with her head hung low. Princess Zhang Li's eyes were a little red. Obviously, she had just been crying. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhang Lu a look, then bowed to Yen Dan according to the etiquette of an emperor and a minister. After that, he sat down on the hassock right next to Yen Dan, facing Princess Zhang Lu. Hearing Wu Qi's movement, Princess Zhang Lu raised her head up and twitched her lips at Wu Qi, indicating that she had smiled. Wu Qi looked at Princess Zhang Lu worriedly. He felt that in just 2 to 3 days, she seemed to have grown up a lot. Princess Zhang Lu, who used to be naive and a little stubborn, seemed to have grown up overnight when he saw her today, becoming mature and sensible. She still had the childishness of a young girl, but her eyes were no longer flowing with indefinite light. Instead, they had become much more resolute and strong. After taking a look at Princess Zhang Lu, Wu Qi nodded slightly at Yen Dan and said, "Your Majesty, what's the matter for summoning me so late at night?" Yen Dan nodded and waved his hand. Ma Yi silently walked out and stood guard in front of the grass hut. Wu Qi gave the surroundings a glance with his divine will. 2,000 feet away, the sinecures and palace guards of Great Yen Dynasty had formed an impenetrable defense. Powerful defensive formations had sealed off the sky and ground, making it so that not even a fly could sneak in. Giving Wu Qi a look, Yen Dan said in a deep voice, "Mod and Sun Kuang, 2 old misters, have successfully transcended their thunder tribulations and become heaven immortals a few months ago." Wu Qi nodded and said, "Yes. If not for the help of these 2 old misters, I'm afraid, father-in-law would not have been able to return from Shui Yuan planet this time." Yen Dan narrowed his eyes. Lightly tapping his finger on the floor next to him, he said coolly, "Each of the 6 dynasties has 2 to 3 imperial advisors and sinecures. After cultivating the Energy Unity Technique and Tranquil Heart Sutra, and receiving the advice and guidance from the immortals from the 2 great immortal sects, they have successfully broken through the barrier in their cultivation base and transcended their thunder tribulations." After pondering for a while, Yen Dan told Wu Qi the result of the meeting in Sung Ao Immortal Abode. All 6 dynasties had people who had become heaven immortals, and in total, there were 10s of them. The overall strength of the 6 dynasties was no weaker than White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Patriarch Jiang Yun and Patriarch Qing Xian were the kind of men of virtue who only focused on cultivating in peace, and were not fond of fighting. After 3 days and 3 nights of negotiation, the emperors of the 6 dynasties were still the outer sect disciples of the 2 great immortal sects, maintaining a relationship with the 2 patriarchs. However, the two great immortal sects would no longer restrict the people of the six dynasties, and would allow them to do whatever they wanted. To some extent, the six dynasties and the two great immortal sects had formed an alliance. The two great immortal sects would not attack the people of the six dynasties, and the people of the six dynasties would not take the initiative to plot against the two great immortal sections. If any one of them was in danger, both sides would do their best to help. This alliance was only aimed at the six dynasties as a whole, and if there was an internal strife among the six dynasties, the two great immortal sects would not interfere. In just 3 years, the overall strength of the six dynasties had suddenly risen to a level where they could be mentioned in the same breath as the two great immortal sections. Therefore, the distribution of resources on Myriad Immortals' planet had to be reconsidered. The two great immortal sects would have 40% of the resources of Myriad Immortals' planet, while the six dynasties would each have 10%. Yan Dan said coolly, initially, with Ing Zheng's temper, he would collude with the six dynasties and completely wipe out the two great immortal sections. But, putting aside how many of us would die in the process, according to Patriarch Jiang Yun, they are not itinerant cultivators without any background, but immortals who also have the backing of some great sect. The two great immortal sects are just the outer branches of their respective sects stationed in Liyuan Galaxy. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. He nodded and said, so, that's why they formed such an alliance. Yan Dan wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead and said with a cold grin, I can tell that Jiang Yun, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi are not greedy people. They have been focusing on cultivating in seclusion, and they do not have any evil intentions. Otherwise, judging from the fact that they still have the backing of the sects behind them, they still have the ability to kill us even if they did not kill us 3 years ago. Yan Dan sneered mockingly and said, that Ing Zheng has forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. If he wants to scheme against these immortals, he will have to see if we can swallow them. What's even more ridiculous is that just like us, their lives are still in the hands of others, and yet they are already restless. Wu Qi raised his head abruptly, a bright gleam flashing in his eyes. What did Yan Dan mean when he said their lives were still in the hands of others? Shaking his head, Yan Dan sighed and said, now that we have formed this alliance with the two great immortal sects, we will be safe and sound in the future. Besides, with the help of the two great immortal sects, especially the power of the sects behind them, we might be able to achieve something else. Pointing at Princess Xianglu, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, just now, I told Zi Xian about her mother. After Zi Xian was born, I used an energy-seizing pill to seize all the blood essence of her mother. That is why Zi Xian lost her mother when she was born. She knows about this. Wu Qi's throat was stuck, and he asked in a deep voice, did His Majesty personally give the order? Yan Dan nodded his head. He sneered and slapped on the top of his head. A faint ghost howl rang out, and a plume of dark smoke rushed out from the top of Yan Dan's head. Amidst the dark smoke was a nascent divinity that stood 3 feet and 6 inches tall, and it was obvious that it had attained some level of maturity. Judging from the appearance of the nascent divinity, it was the nascent divinity cultivated by Yan Dan. However, the nascent divinity of any cultivator was never as mysterious as Yan Dan's. The body of the 3 feet and 6 inches tall nascent divinity was densely covered with countless pitch-black fine threads. Each of these fine threads protruded out from the inside of the nascent divinity. It was obvious that these fine threads had deeply fused with Yan Dan's nascent divinity. Wherever these fine threads intersected with each other, there were tiny black specks the size of sesame seeds. Amidst these flickering black specks, there were also countless tiny bone spikes the size of cow's hair that pierced deep into Yan Dan's nascent divinity. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. It seemed this restrictive spell was mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing, but it was not mentioned in detail. However, the Scroll of Stealing did not mention anything about it. Obviously, the shadowy figure who inherited the Scroll of Stealing did not learn the technique related to the restriction of souls in those years. Grinning coldly, Yan Dan said, 3 days ago, the words spoken by Yu Qianqian had let me know her background. Yan Dan stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while, then he smiled and said, do you know that I, Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, even Mod, Sun Kuang, and many others, have all died once? Before we died, we actually did not know anything about the Tao of cultivation. We were just ordinary mortals, fighting and killing on an ordinary continent. Pointing his right hand at the outside of the cottage, Yan Dan smiled and said, Yingzheng, Chu Ping, Wei Wuji, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, and many others, all of them are the same. In those years, the 6 dynasties were fighting and killing each other, and the grudges between us were intertwined. As a result, when we met here, we immediately fought each other to the death. Laughing loudly, Yan Dan told Wu Qi about what happened to them. His laughter was very hearty, but in the middle of the night, it was filled with an eerie and ghostly air. Just as Wu Qi had expected, the heroes of 6 dynasties were noticed by some almighty expert before they died. Then, after they died, the almighty expert collected their souls and let them witness the various scenes after they died. After that, the almighty expert promised them that he would teach them the Tao of cultivation that would allow them to live forever, allowing them to become immortals. How many people under the heaven could bear such a great temptation? Therefore, the unknown almighty expert collected the souls of the heroes of the 6 dynasties at the end of the Warring States period and brought them to Myriad Immortals planet. Using his mighty magical power, he rebuilt their fleshly bodies and injected their souls into their new bodies, then asked them to cultivate according to the cultivation technique he obtained. Very soon, Yan Dan discovered that their souls were left with an extremely powerful restrictive spell. What was even more frightening was that this soul restrictive spell would be passed down to their next generation. Yan Qijuan, Yan Yushuan, and even Lu Qingfeng had the same restrictive spell in their souls as Yan Dan's nascent divinity. Wu Qi's body tensed up as he asked in a deep voice, Brother Qingfeng, is it the same for him? Yan Dan said coolly, the imperial clan of Great Yan has a huge population. I've tried all kinds of methods, and all the generations of my descendants are trying their best to reproduce, but there is no exception. Apart from Zi Xian, no one succeeded. Only when Zi Xian possessed all the blood essence and bloodline of her mother did the restrictive spell break. Therefore, Zi Xian is the only member of Great Yan's imperial clan who is not controlled by this restrictive spell. Sighing lightly, Yan Dan continued in a soft voice, not only Great Yan, but all the members of the imperial clan of the other 6 dynasties, including all the ministers, generals, and their descendants who came to Myriad Immortals planet together with them. No matter how many techniques they used, no matter how many generations of descendants they had, as far as I know, apart from Zi Xian, none of the members of the imperial clan of the other 6 dynasties were spared. Wu Qi swallowed a lump in his throat and said with a wry smile, what is that man trying to do? Yan Dan said coolly, that man only left us a sentence in those years. We can do whatever we want, but in the future, when he needs anything from us, we must do our best to help him once. With a self-deprecating smile, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, perhaps it has been over 2,000 years, and our overall strength is not enough to catch his attention. That's why he has never contacted us. Wu Qi grinned coldly and said in a cold voice, are you sure? What does your clan do? Yan Dan's face fell instantly. Chapter 367. You clan. Yan Dan grinned coldly and nodded his head thoughtfully. You clan. Yan Dan pondered for a long while, then nodded his head and said, since the founding of Great Yan, there have always been people stirring up rebellions in the imperial court, creating all kinds of conflicts and disputes. I've killed quite a few powerful clans before. But this time, with the incident of Yu clan, I'm sure that someone has been stirring up trouble behind the scenes. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi asked coolly, are they related to that almighty expert? Yan Dan frowned, clapped his hands and said, excellent. Yes, they are related to that man. Wu Qi stared into Yan Dan's eyes and said in a deep voice, with the overall strength of that almighty expert, if he wants to wipe out Great Yan. Without hesitation, Yan Dan said, that man's divine abilities and magical power are simply immeasurable. If he wants to wipe out all 6 dynasties, he can do it with just a flip of his palm. In order to frighten us, before he brought our souls to Myriad Immortals' planet, he once showed us a technique. With just an ordinary palm thunder, he has turned several dozens of planets of the same size as Myriad Immortals' planet into nothingness. Wu Qi smiled and said, so, although Yu clan is related to that man, they are not here to really wipe out Great Yen. Perhaps, Great Yen was just a whetstone, allowing their people to come to Great Yen to train themselves. Therefore, even though we've slaughtered all the members of Yu clan, and even killed Yu Heling and Yu Hetien who suddenly appeared, we don't have to worry too much. Yen Dan closed his eyes and pondered for a long while, then nodded his head slowly and said, when I first met that man, I felt that his speech and behavior were rather old-fashioned, but there was also something strange about him. It seemed that he did not know much about the ways of the world. Old-fashioned, yes, old-fashioned, extremely old-fashioned, and he did not know how to be flexible, only knowing how to use force to suppress others. Wu Qi said in a low voice, you lack strategy and experience. Yen Dan laughed. Yes, he lacks strategy and experience. Based on Dan's experience, he should have been born into a noble family and received an excellent education. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such earth-shattering power. However, the environment he was in was rigid and old-fashioned, 10,000 times more old-fashioned than old teacher Sun. Compared to the people of the 6 countries, he lacks a kind of human vitality. Yes, he lacks vitality. He's practically a puppet refined by the Mo sect. Wu Qi nodded and said, therefore, the people of Yu clan came to Great Yen. Most likely, there were more people who came from the same background as Yu clan who had come to Great Yen. In fact, there were many such people in other countries as well. Regardless of whether they won or lost, they learned a lot from scheming in the imperial court of the 6 states. Yen Dan slapped the floor excitedly. He retracted his nascent divinity, which was shrouded in dark smoke and was tightly imprisoned, and asked in a deep voice, the question is, what is his intention? Then, Yen Dan and Wu Qi said at the same time, talents. He needs a great number of people who are sophisticated and proficient in strategy. Wu Qi added, if the place he was born in is really that rigid and dull, then apart from possessing a cultivation base that can shake the heaven and earth, it is highly possible that apart from that, he will not be able to do anything else. Not only does he need people who are proficient in strategy, but he also needs a manager who knows how to run a business, a general who can lead an army to war, an assassin who is good at scheming and plotting, and... Yen Dan nodded and said, all kinds of talents. Yen Dan gave Wu Qi a praising look, then patted Wu Qi's shoulder and said with a smile, you've enlightened me. For over 2,000 years, I've been pondering what he wants. But now that I think about it, what he needs are exactly the people we've selected. Even if they are not right, they are not far from it. Both men exchanged a glance, then nodded their heads at the same time. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, His Majesty summoned Wu Qi to the palace in the middle of the night. What is it that he wants Wu Qi to do? Yen Dan gave Wu Qi a look, then pointed at Princess Zhang and said, Zi Xian is the only member of Great Yen Imperial clan who is not imprisoned by that restrictive spell. If something changes in the future, the lives of all the members of Great Yen Imperial clan will be in the hands of someone else. Take good care of Zi Xian, protect her, take care of her, and pass on the bloodline of Great Yen Imperial clan to the next generation. In the future, when you and Zi Xian have children, pass half of the boys to Great Yen. Yen Dan sighed lightly and said, my surname is Ji, but I feel that I've let my ancestors down. Therefore, I've been using the name of the dynasty as my surname. Zi Xian's real name should be Ji Zi Xian. In the future, half of the boys of your children should have the surname Ji. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhang a look, then nodded lightly and said, of course. If all of you are dead, half of my and Zi Xian's sons will be passed on to Great Yen, and they will inherit the surname of Great Yen. If Great Yen is destroyed, they will rebuild Great Yen in the future. After listening to Wu Qi's words, Yen Dan breathed out a long sigh of relief and said in a deep voice, that's good. As long as the bloodline of Great Yen doesn't go extinct, that's good enough. Yan Dan sighed lightly, turned to look at Princess Xianglu, and said softly, Zi Xian, the reason why I told you so many things just now is to let you understand that the death of your mother is for the sake of Great Yan, and we have no other choice. If not because of the blood essence and bloodline of your birth mother, which had dissolved the restrictive spell on your soul, you would be in the same situation as me and your father, with your life and death being controlled by someone. Princess Xianglu gave Wuqi a look, and Wuqi nodded his head lightly. Only then did Princess Xianglu bow 3 times to Yan Dan, but she did not say a word. Yan Dan smiled bitterly and helplessly. He took a deep breath, threw his head back, breathed out a long sigh, and said, well, this is the end of the matter. Wuqi, you already know our background, the cause and effect of the 6 dynasties. We have also roughly understood the background of Yu clan, and what the person behind them wants to do. But, all these are just to let you know that we are being controlled by someone, and to remind you to be careful. The reason I called you here today is to ask you to protect Zi Xian, and the other is. Yan Dan turned to look at Wuqi. Vaguely, there was a look of anticipation in his eyes. Wuqi was not stupid. After fusing with the soul of Lu Xiaobai, his intelligence had reached the level of a monstrous genius. Later on, he ate the heavenly wit fruit, which made his intelligence even more monstrous. Just by exchanging a glance with Yan Dan, Wuqi immediately understood what Yan Dan was trying to say. He nodded, raised a finger and said, if your majesty can guarantee the safety of Wuqi's people and belongings in Great Yan, then I, Wuqi, will grant your majesty's request. Yan Dan looked at Wuqi with surprise, smiled and said, you know what I want to say. Wuqi nodded and said, roughly. The present 6 dynasties are no longer what they used to be. With the existence of heaven immortals, the 6 dynasties will no longer be restricted by the 2 immortal sections. Since the 6 dynasties have begun to infiltrate the outside world, we can foresee that in the future, they will try their best to develop their own forces and territories. Even heaven immortals are rare in Liyuan Galaxy. Once the 6 dynasties launch an all-out attack, the entire Liyuan Galaxy, or even the entire minor heavenly circle realm, will fall into the hands of the 6 dynasties in less than a few hundred years. Upon hearing Wuqi's words, Yan Dan nodded his head and said, you are right, you are right. The future is just like what you said. Wuqi sighed lightly and said, the power of the 6 dynasties is growing stronger and stronger. That unknown big shot would definitely pay more attention to the 6 nations. Just like a pig in a barn, the owner will not pay attention to a skinny and small piglet. When the piglet grows into a fat pig that weighs several hundred kilograms, the owner will consider if it is time to kill it and eat it. Yan Dan narrowed his eyes and nodded. He waved his hand and said, go on. Wuqi remained silent for a while. After organizing his words, he continued, according to His Majesty, the emperors, generals, and ministers of the 6 dynasties, as well as all the members of the imperial clan, are controlled by that expert. On top of that, there are people like Yu clan among the 6 dynasties. Therefore, every move of the 6 dynasties cannot be hidden from that expert. How can it be hidden from him? Yan Dan breathed out a long sigh. As for His Majesty, General Jing Ku, Senior MOD, Old Mr. Sun Kuang, Wuqi said coolly, how can His Majesty, General Jing Ku, Senior MOD, Old Mr. Sun Kuang? Taking Zheng, Chu Ping, Xiang Yu, and many others for example. Which one of them was not a famous hero under the heaven? How can they allow themselves to be played by someone like a little bug? Wuqi took a deep breath and said hastily, I'm afraid His Majesty wants Wuqi to find a way to remove the restrictive spell on his nascent divinity, right? Yan Dan gazed deeply into Wuqi's eyes, nodded his head slowly and said, yes, I want you to find a way to remove the restrictive spell on your nascent divinity. I don't care what happens to the other 5 dynasties. But in Great Yan Dynasty, you are the best candidate. Your temperament, character, and overall strength are excellent. Not only that, you are in love with the only princess of Great Yan Dynasty who is not affected by the restrictive spell, and your elder brother, Chimfen, is also a member of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan. Don't worry, Dan. With a bitter smile on his face, Wuqi said, on top of that, I have to do my best. Not only for my elder brother, but also for Zi Xian, for my father-in-law, for the crown prince of Great Yen, and for you. Suddenly, Yan Dan burst into a loud laughter. He nodded his head and said, You're right, you're right. You're the best candidate, because you're the son-in-law of Great Yen. Therefore, I'm not afraid that you'll use the method to remove the restrictive spell on your nascent divinity to threaten Great Yen. I'm sure Ing Zheng and others will send someone to do the same thing. But, who can they send? Ha ha ha, who can they send? With a bitter smile on his face, Wuqi pondered for a while and realized that Ing Zheng and others did not have any suitable candidates to send. Should they send someone from their own imperial clan? Since the restrictive spell was placed there, it was highly possible that the person they sent would alert that almighty expert. Should they send someone unrelated to them? Could they trust those people? Would they dare to use them? Laughing, Wuqi rose to his feet and bowed a few times respectfully to Yan Dan. With a deep voice, he said, I, Wuqi, have promised to carry out this task. But, I hope your majesty can take good care of my elder brother Qingfen and those people around Wuqi. Waving his hand, Yan Dan said in an imposing manner, Don't worry, I'll guarantee them a high official position, a generous salary, and a great wealth. It's just a matter of a word. Before Wuqi could say anything, Yan Dan had already pulled out a token of 9 swallows and thrown it over to Wuqi. What other requests do you have? What do you need? Great Yen Dynasty will help you with all the resources it has. Cut the crap, you should think of a suitable way to discuss this with the Patriarch of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Find a suitable excuse, and then. Yan Dan raised his head and looked at the roof of the cottage, then said in a low voice, The universe is vast, and that man might not necessarily be the strongest expert under the heaven. In this world, there will always be someone who can remove the restrictive spell on his nascent divinity. As long as Great Yen can break free from the restrictive spell, Wuqi, you will be the greatest meritorious minister of Great Yen. Wuqi took over the token of 9 swallows, pulled Princess Zhanglu up, and walked out of the cottage without saying a word. After taking a few steps, he suddenly heard Yan Dan laugh and say, Ma Yi, pass down my decree. I don't want to continue feigning civility with Lao Ai and those people. Purge the palace. Purge it completely. Investigate all the imperial eunuchs and female officials. Those who have been reborn and are not virgins will be executed. Ma Yi answered, while Wuqi turned his head abruptly. Purge the palace? It looked like in order to let Wuqi handle the matter with a peace of mind, Yan Dan was going to start dealing with those people who did not get along with Wuqi. That was good. Chapter 368. It had been half a year since the fall of Yu Academy. The 6 dynasties and the 2 immortal sects lived in peace. The forces of the 6 dynasties had begun to expand outward, quietly encroaching on the planets inhabited by cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy according to the agreed areas. Those planets that were overseen by immortal sects, and had cave abodes built by heaven immortals, were still in a peaceful state. However, those planets with weak overall strength like Dark Radiance Planet and Shui Yuan Planet were suddenly plunged into a great turmoil. Every day, cultivators were killed, and cultivator clans were massacred. Every day, there were internal conflicts between cultivator clans, and every day, inexplicable conflicts broke out between cultivator clans. All of a sudden, Liyuan Galaxy was plunged into a complete mess, and the situation was completely out of control. 2 months ago, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect had quietly made their move. Quietly, they had annexed the planets controlled by Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect, and announced to the entire Liyuan Galaxy that both immortal sects had gained 2 new Elders of Heaven Immortal Realm. After all this was done, both immortal sects ceased all activities once again, and all their Elders of Heaven Immortal Realm went into secluded cultivation on Myriad Immortals Planet. Perhaps because of the cultivation techniques they practiced, no matter it was the immortals or cultivators from both secluded cultivation, they would never venture out into the outside world when they could. They were the kind of people who would never sit if they could lie down, never stand if they could sit, and never walk if they could stand. They were the orthodox cultivators of morality who wholeheartedly studied the heavenly Tao. It was because of this traditional style of the two immortal sects that the 6 dynasties and the two immortal sects could coexist peacefully. One day, Wu Qi was squatting in the drill ground of Gu Tai dynasty's imperial city, gesticulating and teaching Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan the skill of sword controlling and assassination. Relying on an upper-grade flying sword in her hand, Zi Qianyan had unleashed a 10 feet long white beam, suppressing Li Yifeng's sword beam, which was neither gray nor white but of lower grade, and making Li Yifeng's back soaked with sweat. There were a few times when he almost raised his hands and surrendered. Clang! A loud noise rang out as Zi Qianyan's flying sword smashed onto Li Yifeng's sword beam. The sword beam was knocked away, and its gleam dimmed as it fell to the ground. Li Yifeng spat out a mouthful of water, his knees buckling as he fell to the ground. Outside the military field, a group of eunuchs and maids rushed over, hurrying to Li Yifeng's side to please him. Li Yifeng gave a loud cry and gave the eunuchs a series of slaps, forcing them to flee far away. After that, he bowed feebly at Wu Qi and said, "Master, Master, please take pity on your disciple. How about giving your disciple a high-grade flying sword? Just one, just one." Wu Qi clapped his palms, rose to his feet lazily and teased, "Why don't I give you a flying sword of lower-tier magical treasure level?" Then, if he wanted the flying sword, he wouldn't want the throne. "I'll give you a good flying sword, and I'll make your wife the empress of Gu Tai dynasty, and you'll be her concubine." Zi Qianyan giggled, winked at Li Yifeng and said, "My beloved concubine." Li Yifeng shuddered abruptly. Waving his hand hastily, he said, "Forget it, I'll just use this flying sword." Laughing bitterly, Li Yifeng came next to Wu Qi with a pitiful look on his face and murmured in a low voice, "Honorable master, the Gu Tai dynasty has been pacified. The commanders of all the armies have been replaced by my father's trusted subordinates, and all the officials have been replaced by my own men. Next month, I'll be preparing for the coronation ceremony. You." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then shook his head. Then, he pulled out a pile of immortal talismans, spirit pills, energy stones, flying swords, defensive outfits, and many other things, shoving them to Li Yifeng. "I'm not interested in the coronation ceremony. Take these things as a congratulatory gift. As for these 2 low-grade flying swords, I've asked a senior to craft them for you. Treat them well." Li Yifeng was overjoyed when he heard that. Without hesitation, he grabbed all the things. Wu Qi gave Li Yifeng a ferocious glare and said, "You and your wife have to treat these flying swords of low-grade magical treasure well. My sword of greedy wolf was only a low-grade magical treasure in the past. Low-grade magical treasures, you must pay attention to the principle of not showing off your wealth. Although White Cloud Planet is the territory of our sect, I can't guarantee that someone will not rob you of your magical treasures. You must be careful." Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan kept nodding their heads and expressing their agreement, then respectfully bowed and thanked Wu Qi. Just as Wu Qi was about to give them a few words of advice, a sword beam suddenly fell from the sky. An executing disciple, who was in charge of guarding the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation of White Cloud Planet, ran over in a flurry and said, "Grandmaster, Grandmaster, quick! An immortal has come to visit, saying that he is an old friend of Patriarch. Now, the only person who can make decisions in the sect is you, Grandmaster. Grandmaster, please go and welcome him at once." Wu Qi was taken aback. Hastily, he gave some instructions to Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan, then transformed into a beam of dark light and soared into the sky. Over the past few days, everyone in White Cloud Immortal sect had been extremely busy. Apart from Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other elders who had cultivated to the realm of Heaven Immortal, who were staying in seclusion on Myriad Immortal's planet, all the disciples had been dispatched to subdue the planet, Great Flame Planet, which was originally controlled by Spirit Flame sect. The planet was at least 5 times the size of White Cloud Planet, and it was inhabited by a large number of native mortals. After Spirit Flame's sect was wiped out, in order to control the mortals on the planet and prevent them from triggering any disasters of wars, many cultivators, including Jiang Qingzi, who were stationed on White Cloud Planet, had rushed to Great Flame Planet. Currently, apart from a few nascent divinity cultivators who were in secluded cultivation on White Cloud Peak and Spirit Cloud Peak, Wu Qi, the executing disciple of Discipline Hall, was the one with the highest cultivation base and seniority. Therefore, this executing disciple, who was in charge of the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, came directly to Gu Tai Dynasty to look for Wu Qi. Bringing a beam of dark light behind him, he flew hastily to the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, which served as the outer gate of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Wu Qi gave it a glance with his eyes, and saw an old man standing next to the formation. He was clad in a yellow linen shirt made from hemp, a pair of straw sandals on his feet, and holding a green wooden staff in his hand. His head was bald, and only a tuft of long hair was left behind his ears, fluttering in the wind. He was standing on top of a mountain rock, looking at the surrounding scenery with great interest. The old man had a tall stature, and his back was slightly hunched. He had a kind countenance, and the aura emanating from him was righteous but not evil. Clear air could be seen rippling around him, wheeling vaguely and taking the shape of a white crane. He truly looked like an immortal, elegant, and otherworldly, which made him look like an immortal. Quietly, Wu Qi landed next to the old man, cupped his fist, and said, "Senior Immortal, Wu Qi, executing disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Discipline Hall, offers greetings." The old man spun and gave Wu Qi a quick glance, then cried out in surprise, "Eh. Little guy, how old are you now? Are you 1,000 years old?" Wu Qi shook his head hastily. What a joke! 1,000 years old? He was only in his early 20s this year. The old man cried out in surprise, then rushed up to Wu Qi and stood less than 3 inches away from him. He gave him a thorough look, then said hesitantly, "Could it be that you're only 600 years old this year? That's really young." TSK, you're indeed young and tender." Wu Qi shook his head again. 600 years old? How could he be that old? The old man gave a loud cry and took 2 steps back. Staring at Wu Qi, he cried out, "What? You're not even 600 years old." A peak stage nascent soul cultivator who's not even 600 years old. What kind of spirit pills have you taken? You must be at least 300 years old. Wu Qi shook his head with a hollow smile. 300 years old? What a long distance it still had to travel. The old man took a deep breath, stared at Wu Qi, laughed dryly, and said, 100 years old, you must be at least 100 years old. Ah. When I formed my nascent soul at the age of 100 years old, I was already considered one of the top geniuses in the sect. You can't be less than 100 years old, can you? Wu Qi cupped his fist deeply, laughed dryly, and said, "Dear Master Immortal, Wu Qi, I'm 22 years old this year." The old man was struck dumb. Blinking his eyes, he quickly circled around Wu Qi. He cried out in shock, 22 years old. A 22 years old peak stage nascent soul cultivator. And you're cultivating the Energy Unity Mystic Technique. If you're cultivating the Energy Unity Mystic Technique of inaction, doesn't that mean you'll have a chance to form your nascent divinity? A 22 years old nascent divinity. Doesn't that mean you'll have a chance to become a gold immortal in the future? TSK, a gold immortal. Suddenly, the old man stomped his feet and cried out, "Jiang Yun, you unfilial little bastard. Lao Tzu is here. Your master, Immortal Green Staff, is here. Get your ass out here and receive the guest for Lao Tzu. Damn it, it has only been 100,000 years, and you've become so ostentatious. I can't believe you've learned from those itinerant cultivators, occupying a mountain and declaring yourself as the king." A cloud towered up into the sky from White Cloud Peak. After being informed by his disciples, Patriarch Jiang Yun hurriedly broke out from Tsang Ao immortal abode and rushed out from the grand universal teleportation formation, stepping on a watery cloud and rushing towards Wu Qi. From a long distance away, Patriarch Jiang Yun had already cried out, "Master, it is really you. I haven't seen you for 100,000 years. How are you doing? Where's Master's wife? Why haven't I seen her?" Wu Qi blinked his eyes quickly. This old man, Immortal Green Staff, was Patriarch Jiang Yun's master. The energy unity mystic technique of inaction of our sect? In other words, the energy unity mystic technique of White Cloud Immortal sect was just a mediocre scripture in Immortal Green Staff sect? But, this energy unity mystic technique was already a pretty good mystic technique for immortal cultivators. After Mod and Sun Kuang obtained the energy unity mystic technique, it took them 3 years of laborious cultivation to break through the heaven immortal tribulation. Judging from this, the immortal sect Immortal Green Staff belonged to was not weak at all. Without hesitation, Wu Qi cupped his hands under his sleeves and stood aside obediently. Patriarch Jiang Yun sprung over, dropped to his knees excitedly, and gave Immortal Green Staff 17 to 18 kowtows. With this kowtow, Wu Qi and all the other White Cloud Immortal sect disciples on the peak had no choice but to drop to their knees and kowtow to Immortal Green Staff like Patriarch Jiang Yun. Clanking and clanking filled the air, which made Immortal Green Staff laugh out loud. He raised the green wooden staff in his hand and knocked on Patriarch Jiang Yun's head, making him cry out in pain. After a long while, Immortal Green Staff finally helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet. After that, his face turned slightly unsightly as he said resentfully, "This time, your master's wife did not come out with Lao Tzu. She had a fight with someone, and her left arm was chopped off. It took me a great effort to find some spirit herbs to reattach it. You also know that your master's wife is very fond of beauty. Someone hit her face with a starlight ball, making it look like a pockmark. She is now undergoing treatment, so how could she come out and embarrass herself?" Patriarch Jiang Yun was taken aback. He roared furiously, "Who is this demon? How dare he hurt my master's wife? Master, you..." Immortal Green Staff waved his hand and said with a wry smile, "The reason Lao Tzu came here this time is to ask you for help." "Ugh, how many disciples do you have now? How many nascent soul cultivators and nascent divinity cultivators do you have?" Wu Qi's ears pricked up immediately. "Ask for help? It seems those things that I've discussed with Yen Dan can finally be carried out." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.